mā te whakarongo, mā te kōrero, mā te nākau, mā te wārura, mā te manaki mai, mā te manaki atu, ka puawai te manamatanga, tihei Māori ora. Through listening, through talking, from the heart, from the spirit, through giving and receiving respect, understanding will bloom. This is the essence of life.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you, Craig. Making jokes. I feel like making a joke already about council's not this one, but I won't. Apologies. Do we have any apologies? Fee's away on leave. That's great. So not that we get through sustain an apology from Fee and Rachel. Welcome to the meeting.
John's going to be running a little bit late.
John's still running a bit late. He's trying to come here, but hopefully the plane hasn't broken down. While it's flying.
She's got a leave of absence. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Voprai has a leave of
Oh,
absence.
okay. Fair point. Yeah, we're missing Jaspreet as well. I should have thought that one through. So look, the plan is just to deal with the apologies through 12. People can stay that long. Don't have to dip out. Okay, that's good. So can we sustain the apology for Jaspreet, the lateness for John, out of his control? I'll move that from the chair to have a second, please. Thank you, Darren. I'll put the motion of those in favour, please say aye. I haven't been informed of any leaves of absences, so that's super cool. Are there any matters coming up in the papers that you need to prepare an interest for? Straightforward, I doubt that. There are no extraordinary or urgent items, but we do have a late item, which is the paper. Well, it's now going to become 7.12. It's the thank you.
Interim performance report.
Could be the right word. Thank you. The interim performance report for period 1 July 23 through 31 October. So there were two reasons it was late. One is there were some technical issues in compiling the agenda full stop, and it's advisable if we want to deal with it in a timely fashion that we actually accept it today. Otherwise, when we meet next on the 14th of February, apart from having a big agenda that day, it's irrelevant. So the short of it is, I would like to move a motion for the appropriate parts of Lagoima that we receive and consider this late item. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Rob. Is there any discussion on the motion? Great. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. One other thing in terms of the agenda that I just would like to note, I haven't quite worked out what's happening, but we once we've dealt with 7.1, I am then going to put adjacent to each other 7.2, which is the next steps around the legal matters, and 7.8, which is the Environmental Services Business Improvement Plan 17A review. They're not unrelated, but actually more importantly, I've got Jane on board, and I need to let Jane talk to us and then probably get away to other higher honours that she's working on at the moment. So with that, that's the nature of the agenda. And obviously at 7.12, we'll add in the interim performance report as well. And for the record, if we could just note the point that we noted that actually we do have a cyber security report, which for next time we must make certain isn't public excluded rather than public. We've got the minutes of our last meeting, somewhat short minutes because actually we virtually went straight into public excluded 15th of November. I moved there, it's taken as a true and correct record. Right, seconder, please. Thank you, Sarah. Any discussion? Can I put the motion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. We haven't been informed of any public participation. So that gets us then straight into 7.1, which is the work program. Yeah, have you taken that, or have you got a staff member here?
No.
Oh, there's Anne. It's Anne. Okay, we're into it.
Me today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and councillors. It's my pleasure to present the work plan report, which is just basically the update from what you had agreed to on your 22nd of March 23 agenda. So basically we are delivering on that work plan. There's just 3 items that have made changes onto there. There's a legal matters report, which the Chair mentioned before, that's come onto this agenda that was never previously planned. And also just further to your request earlier in the year, you just wanted us to update that long-term plan project timeline, and so we've just added that as well. The only one that we're just going to move to potentially the March meeting is just that internal audit report, bribery and corruption. That one has been moving around a little bit, but we actually do have the engagement letter now signed with Deloitte, and we're going to have a meeting with them on Monday just to arrange who needs to be involved, and we'll get that organised for the start of next year when everyone's nice and fresh and back. So thank you.
None of us are laughing at that one at the moment. Anyway, keep going. Is that it?
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay, any comments on the plan program looking into 2024? Any thoughts or comments? Couple. Look, I think I quite agree that the new ones that come on board with the legal matter, next steps. It's probably a bit like the 17A. It will be probably a matter that we need to see quarterly. So I don't know whether that means more exits along that line, but that's not the drama. But other than that, we'll expect to see it. And I was struggling, I've looked at it twice now, and you'll tell me that I've got it wrong. Under the 25-26 annual plan, accounting policies and significant assumptions. We're dealing with that in June 24.
Well, we have already dealt with significant assumptions last time and the accounting policy, so actually that's just missed off the list there.
But it's just we wouldn't be dealing with a 25-26 annual plan in June 24.
No, but that's the final of them. But no, the crosses, something has happened there because they've already come up to the committee meeting, so I need to just go back and check that.
Sweet, okay, that'll be good. Look, I just want to draw committee's attention to, indeed, the top 2 X's under the 14th of February. We're going to talk, we have a little workshop, don't we, later on this afternoon, or first thing this afternoon around the LTP, and it reflects the significant work that all of you are going through, but particularly staff, as we head towards the 14th of February. And you'll see there that our role is to recommend, is to consider and recommend the draft to council. So it's going to be a big meeting. None of these are small meetings, are they? And it just reflects it's a big one, and I just wanted to draw attention to it. Okay, if any other questions, comments, I don't think there are. Can I move to the recommendation which we received, the report with no changes? Given I've done all the talking, perhaps that's the solution to a quick meeting. I'm going to move the motion. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Julie. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you very much. Right. Legal matters next step. Jane, welcome to the meeting, and thank you. You're here this morning, at least by way of Zoom. So can I just pass this over to you, or any of your supporting cast to take us through, please, Jane?
Thanks very much, Bruce. And if I could just start by saying there's no higher honours than SDC's Finance and Assurance Committee.
Well said.
Good morning, Mayor and councillors. Look, the report in front of you follows on from the council resolutions in the middle of November to develop an implementation plan to address the 12 recommendations from the legal review. And I think it was quite important to council in the discussion that we had that we were to assign and give some specificity to where the 600k plus or minus 30% might be spent. And the third thing was to develop a monitoring regime. Now, my name's on this report, so I held the pen, but I would like to emphasise that it's owned by ELT. They've had a go at it, changed it, added to it, and so on and so on. Each action has an ELT owner, and I think, yes, it does, your version does show that. But I'd like to just emphasise, and it's noted in the executive summary, that the plan will change over time. Now, what we mean by that, the timeframes might change, the allocation of the money might change, and actually, now that we have a new government, there's going to be changes come from central government. But I know, Mr. Chair, you were really keen to get us a draft on the table before Christmas, and that's very much what you've got. It's Cameron's intention to appoint a steering team. That will have its own terms of reference. It'll be internal. It'll make sure stuff gets done, that necessary reporting comes back to this committee. And you'll see it's not in the table, but I think that it is going to be necessary to appoint a project manager. It will be the team's, at the team's behest, whether that's somebody internally or it's not. So I hope that's enough of a scene setter. I'll take everything else as read and probably answer some questions, or happy to answer some questions or give it a go or pass to somebody else. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Jane. And look, it was remiss of me when we're dealing with apologies, not just to acknowledge for the minutes that Cameron did pass his apologies on for this meeting as well. He rang me early on. He had a conflicting priority with Milford Opportunities, and I had a chat with him about it, and it made a lot of sense that I've got Anne, she'll keep me under control, but more importantly, Cameron would be advised, it was advisable for him to be at the Milford Opportunity, so I said, please go to that. So just to recognise that you mentioned Cameron's name, and indeed Cameron's driving this, but he's not here to speak to it, not because he doesn't want to, but because he's got other things to deal with, so I just want to acknowledge that. So questions for Jane, or indeed Anne, she's on ELT, about the planned program. No, just I just wanted to note a couple of things, and they're very close to indeed what you've focused on, Jane. Oh, sorry, have you hand up?
Don was there as well.
Oh, sorry, Don, it's plenty of Christmas trees hiding hands. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question, or yes, at least one question. So we've got this 12-point plan. Some of the, one of the, or two of these initiatives here require an urgent response, including better informing landowners so that they can understand the activities that are enabled. But also in this, and that's got an urgent response, is to provide this information. But at the same time, this 12-point plan, this report makes it clear that there's some work to be done for us to understand what the rules are, or what can be done around this particular space. So I'm just wondering if it's appropriate to be providing information to landowners when we don't know what that information is.
Jane?
That seems like things are...
Yeah, no, I understand the question, I think. Look, we will have to do some work on it pretty promptly before, so we wouldn't advise landowners without being very sure ourselves through getting some external expertise in to define what our plan actually says.
Yes,
does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, it does, and of course I'm coming at it from a cost perspective. Yeah. I can see it's all going to be expensive for us. So part of understanding what our role is in this space is understanding what the rules are around SNAs. But it seems that that particular space is going to be changing too. So is it appropriate for us to be spending money working on this particular area when we don't know what we're working on? We don't know.
So if I could just add to my earlier comments, since these 12 recommendations, you're right, we've had a change in government, and that's why the plan is very much in draft. I'm trying to get it up on my screen again. I think we could give you an assurance as ELT that we won't be doing any double work. We will have to wait until we get more clarity around the new government's intentions first. And urgent, it's top of the priority, but it's not going to be done next week or next month, I wouldn't have said.
So there is a natural bit of time. A comment from me is I'm conscious from the review that we can't ignore the fact we have a plan which we can't be clear with the community on at the moment about what it means. That's why we got done over. to put it in the crude sense. So it is important that we have an existing plan which is in the community, which technically creates rules for our community, and obviously particularly our farming community. I think we might be wise to know what they really mean. And I think that is the first step. The fact that it could all be taken away, I agree, is challenging, and we're going to come back to that when we deal with actually the next paper, and indeed when we get on to the paper about the long-term plan. It's difficult.
It doesn't matter what you come up with around the rules. At the end of the day, if someone, if the council or planner decides that someone needs to go to court, there's a decision right there.
Exactly.
Regardless of what the rules are yesterday or tomorrow.
I quite agree. I think I'm close to your point, Ron, which is that actually we have rules. We can't be clear about our rules at the moment. We might feel the need as a council to enforce them, but we've got to be clear about those rules. So I think that's really what is priority one here, albeit Jane is also saying pragmatically, given the time of year that we're in and actually being able to get action on this, it may well be that we find more clarity from the new government before further action is taken. So that's why we need a good steering group in the form of ELT or some version thereof, managing and overviewing this for us. Yeah, sorry, Eric, I better call you Don, sorry. I had the D right.
Probably following on a bit from Don's case, I was a bit disappointed that the review panel didn't actually go and interview Peter Charters. And I think it would be well worth this group of councillors, and I'm not sure how many of the previous council actually went up to Tiana Downs and had a look, but before we make decisions on these rules that we want to implement, to go and get the other side of the story, and especially for those non-farmers in the group, to understand what effect it has on farming, because to me as a farmer, it makes me very nervous about what's been proposed here. So I would like to take other councillors up there just to get a different perspective and a different view on what's been proposed.
Yep. That's part of how do we implement the recommendations. Okay, I think we need to be careful here. We have looked at the review and we have heard the reasons why our reviewers didn't directly talk with Mr. Charteris. Okay, and that issue is now passed. We have agreed with the report and we have got our findings. What I hear you say, which is really important, is actually this recommendation in option one, essentially action one, I should call it that one, the first point, is actually about clarity. Now, if as part of that it warranted and is relevant through the PSG that actually should occur, well, that may well be a good step. But I would leave it to this process, and I think we've got to on record your views about that. That would be part of this clarifying what do we really mean by this. Agreed.
The only point, 9.1 is the only point I really agree with in that.
Which one, sorry?
9.1.
Which is, 9.1.
It's encouraging farmers, the council advocating to government that, any, native bush is put into the ETS and they can claim credits. I mean, that's the carrot and the stick. It's the carrot approach that it's encouraging people to retire ground and receive credits for it. So
I'm not disagreeing with you, Derek. What I'm saying is that gets wrapped up in this program. Okay, and I hear your point. You express your view that really is part of this program, and it may well be that your argument is that actually your colleagues should go on site and understand what clearance and regrowth and which was all part of that means. I get that. I hear your point. Any other thoughts? So Margie and then Don.
Thank you. Thanks, Bruce.
Sorry,
Thanks for your report, Jane. I want to talk about an article that came through a rural magazine last week, and it's about community-led answers to rural problems. And it's the Huranui District Council, and I'm wondering if Council could potentially have a conversation with the Huranui District Council and what they did around biodiversity. It was their view was that the attitude of landowners was changing and that community-led decisions and solutions were coming from within that district, with one of the country's largest land care groups, several catchment groups, being a landowner, initiated Huranui Biodiversity Trust, which was supported by the council. The decisions were made by that trust around the SNAs and SNLs, as well as consultation with other stakeholders such as iwi. I have that article. I was going to print it off today, but I'm just wondering if I could share that as well with this going forward.
We're happy to get all the information we can and learn from other councils where we can. So thank you for that, Margie. If you send it through, Councillor Ruddencloud, if you send it through, we'll be happy to follow up.
Thank you. It was led by some elected members, a couple of trainees. So I think it would be well worth it. So I appreciate that, Jane. Thank you. I'll send it around to everybody.
So I've got my order right. I've got Don, then Sarah, then Christine.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just following up on Derek and Margie's points here. What we've got here is sort of legal expert-led review, whereas this example that Margie's talking about is community-led. And I think there's a lot of merit in that as far as having an understanding in the community about what you can and can't do with regards to this indigenous vegetation. So that could be a way of looking at this issue rather than spending money on these reports and reviews, is to actually go and visit the place. If you're going to take someone to court over these issues, go out there and see them.
Look, I'm not an example. I feel like I'm defending it. I don't actually disagree with what I've heard this morning, but you're talking about the how we implement the recommendations. I don't think you're challenging that the recommendations shouldn't go through, because the recommendations here are that we go through with this, which includes the dollars, and we have a process which has been outlined and we adopted as a council, or sorry, you as a council, it's obviously not me, at our last meeting on the 15th, and the conversation so far, and I've still got a couple to go, is very much about actually how do we go about this, which I think is actually a good, rich discussion. That's good. Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of probably nitpicky points from my perspective. Just interested in the page 32 and 38, there's a couple of council workshops in there that have had an allocation of a budget. I'm just wondering why, because they read as if they're internal workshops. So I'm just wondering about that budget. And also on 10.2, I think that should read January 24, because January 24 has been abroad.
Yeah, that's right. That'd be a hard one to beat, wouldn't it? So your question is about 4.4, is that right?
Sorry, 10.2.
No, it's 4.4. You talked about the budget for a workshop, is that right?
32.
32.
Yeah.
So that one was, yeah, so
Just
4,
keep going.
4.4 and 10.2 were my just words for that.
I'm just getting them up again on my screen.
So Jane, the first question was 4.4, where
Yep.
I think you're questioning why is there a budget against that line, Sarah?
Yeah, and
Is that the one about the council workshop?
correct.
Yeah.
And then there was
Yeah.
a second one on 10.2 around the another workshop on the 100-day government.
Yep. I'm nearly there, but while I'm just flicking down this slow thing here, 4.2 from memory, I think, and Anne will remember that, council workshop, we had nothing in there, and then we thought, actually, we'll need some good legal advice for independent of council to come and brief the council, because this goes to the heart of a lot of what they do. So that was why we put that small budget in there, to give us the ability to bring in some external people to do that. The next one on 10.2, I'm coming to that. 9.
Not my doing.
10.2, I've gone past it. I'm sorry about this, councillors, I'm just a bit slow in this system.
Okay, Jane, the 10.2 is the council workshop on incoming government's 100-day plan.
Right, again, to bring in externals to help us do that.
All right.
These are big, they're pretty big things, especially the second one, but also the first one. So that's the answer.
Okay, thank you. I just
I
want to
think
know.
one of the challenges, and I hear people concerned about is I'm conscious that in terms of the report, the finding, one of the deficiencies, gaps for council as it considered the enforcement orders with the lack of reasonable legal advice. So I guess this is Jane saying that at critical points as we try and determine things, we might be wise to spend a wee bit of money, I hate to say it, to make ourselves safe. Okay, I've got Christine and then Margie.
Thank you. I appreciate the work that means that in a very short time frame this report has come back to us, and understand that there'll be further opportunities with a quarterly review to look at these in more detail. We were not able to do that today. So yeah, really appreciate that. And I think when you look at the case that occurred, there were a number of matters obviously being brought to our attention through the report. So this is outlining a way to look forward. Within that, I had a question around 4.42 around the workshop with legal responsibilities. If possible, I wondered if that could be earlier, because I think the sooner we know that, the better. Secondly, I was wondering if it could be recorded, if we're bringing in outside people to do that, so it's available for new councillors in the future and may just need to be updated. And then I wondered if the writers of the report, given their knowledge already, would be valuable in providing that. And that also relates through to Section 8 with the interviews around the panel. And it seems that whole process will involve internal staff only. Again, I wonder about the value of an external review around that with specialists in that field, particularly understanding what the important criteria are that we need to consider in that process, and again, whether the writers of the report could add value to that process.
So back to you. Thank you very much for the questions and comments. With regard to the first issue about a council workshop sooner rather than later, that would be up to the council work plan. There's no reason we can't have it sooner because the legislation's in place now. But again, I can't commit on behalf of ELT or Cameron. But having heard the discussion go there, I think it's something that's dear to the chair's heart too. We could move that one and do it a bit quicker. The number 8, and my system here is letting me down to get there quickly, but I think suspect it's the appointment of the legal panel. Is that correct?
Panel of legal advisors.
Yes, you'll see some money against that. We did think that we would need some external help given the busyness of staff here, and that funding was for somebody to come in and guide us through that process. You do need somebody with a background in local government and also a legal background, because there's so many facets to what we do. So I think we're saying we've already thought that we, as you suggest, need some external stuff. And then the third point about the advisors we already have, we take that point too. So I'm sure ELT will take that on board as they develop the detail of what we're doing here. Did I miss any of the questions?
Just whether that training around the legal responsibilities could be recorded.
That's up to council. I don't see any reason why not. But I'll leave that to whoever sets up the council. Yeah.
Thank you.
good idea.
As you've been asking your questions, Christine, one of the things that has come to my mind is clearly, while these are dealing with the 12 recommendations, the little project steering group is going to have to think sequentially, how do they work? Because I don't think they're linear. I don't think you start at 1 and get to 12.
Yeah.
We know that because we have an existing district plan, 1 and 2 are really important, but the others don't wait till that's done because this other stuff has to happen. So things like that workshop on the at 4.4, which is actually about our compliance manual, is actually really important. And I'll leave it to the steering group as to how they prioritise that. Although I hear the point that is being made, can that not be brought forward? That's a critical area for us to get right, because actually it's a key part of actually the problem. So and there are some pretty handy suggestions to how to fix that. Okay, now Margie, sorry, I think you've got another question.
Thank you. Page 28, Jane. Actions request VES assistance to undertake a district-wide assessment to identify significant Indigenous vegetation. And then on the comments there, it's depending on the outcome of this request, SDC may need to allow for further funding, e.g. ecologists $100,000. Before that occurs, will there be any consultation with the farmers in our high value areas? Because a lot of farmers have their own high value plans. They've already got these farm plans that's already been identified. I think we could be spending money that actually doesn't need to be spent, and the consultation out with the farming community would be the preferred option for me before we spend more.
Yeah, my comment on that one would be that this may well be changed by the government anyway. This plan was written before it became a bit clearer that they may well make these changes there. So there's that to step through first before we go any further. And I think we're hearing clearly we need to be working with the farming community as we work through these. So the ELT team sitting around the table or in the room will make sure that happens, I would have thought. And again, it comes back to the having a very well-focused steering group with good terms of reference, which may well include something around make sure there's there is in here, there's actions around engagement plans and involving people.
Thank you. The communication team we've already had some farmer discussions around the table here from a number of these key stakeholders. So I think it would be really valuable to work again with comms around it and that group. There's been a couple of meetings.
Thank you. I think there's a capacity issue in here too, but that'll be for ELT to address, because this is because a lot of it's communications and engagement. It's highly technical stuff as well. So we need to make sure we've got a dedicated somebody providing advice, whether it's internal or internal supported by external. That's still to be determined. But it needs to be a big focus, and that's why you see it right up the front.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments people would like to make? Yes, Paul?
One small point, probably along the lines of what Margie's talking about. I mean, I can see that we would need extra ecological expert opinion, but it's important that any pre-existing ecological reports on various sites are not overlooked.
Thank you.
I could just quickly add to that. Council did actually help to fund through the Environment Southland the investigation into some of the farm sites along with the farmers. So that information is at them, working with the farmers, like Councillor Ruffle suggests, we should be able to get that if they volunteer that to us. That's the only thing. They need to provide that information to us voluntarily, so that we could incorporate that. But it's a very good point. A lot of those people that have been proactively in that space with farm plans will have great ecological data available, which we may be able to source. So I'm aware of that. Some of the new elected members may not have been aware of that. But there is information out there if we do have to go down that path.
And the key to that, Fran, is thriving Southland and
Yes,
and the catchment groups. And what we're doing in that space is incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for
Yeah, and I think we've noted it too. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Tom?
Just sort of going into your point, Paul, and into Fran, your just discussion here, I can confirm that Environment Southland historically do engage in ecological reporting on behalf of anyone who can prove they have a significant area for protection. And that can be whether it be a farmer or electricity corporation or a fisheries or whoever's involved. So I take on board what everyone's saying in terms of, Jane in particular earlier saying that we want to avoid any form of duplication or replication. We don't want to be spending time and money and investment on stuff that we've already done. But what you'll find a lot of the time is that if people have a real vested interest in this space, they are already doing that. And that's, I suppose, something that quite a few people have talked about. So while there's changes happening, and while we talk about a level of uncertainty over this 100 days, one thing stays static, and that is we know that these areas exist to a degree. We know that the people who are the shareholders and the stakeholders, if they have a valued vested interest, they are certainly doing the work. They are already doing a lot of that work, that groundwork. And it might just be a little bit of tweaking here and there to realise some of the newer legislation.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate your advice. There's some, again, very rich discussion about actually existing sources, existing people, existing information that would help with this. Bearing in mind, we've still got fundamental problems with the plan that's difficult to interpret when you know how to do it. Are there any other questions or comments folk would like to make?
Oh,
yes.
As there are, I think with everything that council has to regulate, there is a small percentage who do not do the best thing for whatever that aspect is, and that's the reason we have these rules, unfortunately.
Agreed. It's the problem of being a regulator. It's a very difficult one, and also trying to lead and work with the community as well when you regulate them too. Okay, are there any other questions? Do I have somebody prepared to put these motions? Thank you, Christine. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Sarah. Is there any discussion on the motion? I should really give you the chance to lead off. Sarah, is there anything you want to say? Or we'll put it to vote?
I had before, so.
Okay, fine. Sarah, is there anything you want to say to the motion?
I think that just as it's obvious that this will be a work in progress, and I think that's indicated in the recommendation.
I think it's also, Sarah, why, if I could add to that comment, why I said we were looking at our work program, this will be a constant at our quarterly meetings. And I mean, if I could give an indication, as I said, this is just actually trying to initiate and agree that this working group go or the steering group going. But it will be great to see actually how this works its way out, taking into account the very good conversation we've had today. I sense we need to keep moving on. These folk out there, comments I'd like to make at this stage. Can I then look at the motion? We should take them as a whole. We receive, we note that we've complied with the Act. We're saying that we note the 12-point action plan. We note there could be changes to the budget, and we note that Cameron's and the CE is appointing the steering team to drive this. And we've already commented today on the ambitious targets and even want that time and even actually bringing some of those forward. In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against?
Aye.
Derek? Don? Okay, do you want your names recorded? Okay, the motion is passed. Thank you very much. Can we move to the, what was 7.8? 7.8 and is now, becomes 7.3, which is the Environmental Services Business Improvement Plan. update. So, g'day. Oh yeah, I've got Jane online, and I think it's Sue. Is that right?
It's Sue, that's right.
Sue, nice to meet you, Sue. Again, thank you for being back here. I'll leave it to Sue between you and Jane as to who produces and well, probably you both want to talk to the page.
Exactly. Thank you, Worship Councillors. So this is the third quarterly progress update for the Environmental Services Business Improvement Plan. And so I'll cover off a couple of admin matters first. On page 5 of the report, there's that's where the actions have been reordered. You requested that the due date, that we order them by due date. So we've done that, and we've also maintained the groupings of similar actions. And it's still a bit clunky, so I think it's going to be a work in progress to make it easily understandable. There's also another, on that page 5, there's also another column added, which is LC, learning and compliance, legal and compliance, sorry, and it's to provide a focus for the new team. And legal and compliance are going to be responsible for non-compliance activity, such as animal control and noise. Now, a bit of a progress update on the highlights. The new contracts for getting external consultants to help with processing consents are in train, and some are in place already. So that's good, and will be great for improving the progress of consenting processing. And there was concern about the after-hours call centre, and the customer support manager has talked to and he has a very close relationship with the owner of the call centre, and they're meeting and exceeding their KPIs, so that's good news, and he's going to keep in very regular contact with them. The other thing is we had a win with the customer service training that will commence in the new year. Christchurch City Council have given us all of their information, their training information, and will give us their online information. So we will adapt that so that it relates to Southland District Council. And there's been some good progress updating the website on information that will help customers when they're applying for consents or when they want to understand what's required by the council. That's a work in progress, though. Now, I think it's on page 14, we were going to ask you to review the dates for some of the actions. As we've understood what's required, what work is required, we'd like to extend some of those. However, I'd like to defer that to a later meeting, and any questions that you might have, and devote the time that we have to provide you with the results of the completed customer survey. So we received that over the last couple of days, and it makes pretty bleak reading. It's not a great update. So before I hand over to Jane Parfitt, just please know that the staff in Environmental Services are aware of the performance and are really committed to making improvements and finding ways to make this work. So that report is being handed out now, and I'll hand over to Jane to give an overview and to give them.
Thanks, Sue, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for putting these two reports together. I think we're seeing more and more that the plans we've got in place for the last issue and this one are all connected, and I think it's a good idea that Sue's put forward that we just defer making decisions on these dates now that we've got a comprehensive picture. I would like to just echo Sue's comments about the staff. It's been a really challenging year for the Environmental Services team. We didn't make the progress, excuse me, we would have liked to. And actually, as GM for most of the year, I need to share responsibility for this. When you cast your eyes down to the survey results, they confirm we're not achieving what we set out to do, and we need to take urgent steps to address our performance. And I'm talking about, I've moved on now, but that's from all of us who have been involved in environmental services. That said, and Sue mentioned some of the steps that we have underway, and I'd just like to go through these. We are already making changes. As Sue said, we're in the process of appointing a panel of suitably qualified consultants. They will help us move through the backlog of consent applications, and then we can get on the front foot. We're also in the process of appointing a panel of hearing commissioners, which again will simplify processes going forward. Second thing we have done, we've appointed Daniel Kinnock on a short-term basis to lead the resource consenting team through the changes that are happening at the moment. Now, Daniel was a principal planner at Auckland Council. He chaired and coordinated the Resource Consents Community of Practice group and led on countless process improvements. He is, as I said, a shorter term contractor, but we felt the need to get, is he here?
Yeah.
Somebody's
Looks like he is. G'day, Daniel, how are you? Welcome to the team. It's great to have you here.
Hello, Daniel. I haven't actually met Daniel, so I hope I'm getting all this right, Daniel, and making you your qualifications suitably described. So we're in safe hands. He's here today. Of equal importance is our permanent group manager regulatory, Adrian Humphreys. He's starting on the 18th of December, and he'll be the person who will be the continuity. Over the course of the year, this team in environmental services have faced interim leaders. We've all done our best, but the permanent GM will certainly lead the charge. You probably already know Adrian's coming from Tasman District Council, where he was regulatory and recovery manager, and he's worked in this space for the past 17 years. What's next? Big recruitment drive in the new year will get underway. I think as we've gone through, particularly the last month, 6 weeks, we're getting a better handle on the resourcing requirements we need. Sue mentioned we've got Christchurch City Council's training pack, so we'll get that underway in the new year. I'm just looking at my notes, and I think that's all I really wanted to say. I think we need to own up and say we've got some stuff to do. We've got challenges ahead of us, but it's fairly significant what we've already got underway. And the bottom line is we've got to work together and improve our customer service. I think that's enough for me.
Jane, thank you, Sue, and welcome to the team. Dan, you on board. Questions? What you throw?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Noting the comments from Jane and also noting their commitment to the team, which I've seen firsthand to actually knuckle down and sort this out. The baseline measure that we've got here is pretty low, but I think it's a hard way to move forward. But I just wonder, and this kind of ties in with that previous paper that we've just heard from, whether this needs a bit of a steering group over the top of it as well, and potentially with some, almost an advisory panel from the sector as well to start measuring from that 6%, to actually get a real-time gauge of how we're improving around all this. I'd be interested in sort of thoughts on that, Jane or Bruce.
Yes, the answer is yes. We have a steering group in place at the moment for the 17A stuff, but it would be fair to say that now that we've got some more permanency coming along, we should review the membership and the terms of reference, and you're right, possibly have one steering group going across both of these issues. I think that's over to Cameron and ELT, but when they work on the terms of reference, which I'm happy to give them a hand on, that and the membership, and as you say, some sort of external advice. I think we'll take all these ideas on board. These last two reports, particularly the legal issue, recommendations, implementations, were very much, as we said in the last discussion, a draft, a starter for 10. The 17A one has now taken on with the survey information, and look, you've got a one-pager there, but we're expecting to have an in-depth report from the research company, and that'll point us to some good data and where we need to really focus our efforts on. So a long answer to a yes, I agree, we agree. I'm agreeing on behalf of Cameron and ELT, so hope they're sitting nodding.
Thanks, Daniel, as well. Yes, Christine.
Thank you, and it's positive to read alongside just this disappointing report, as you said, that there are some actions in hand. The consultants to deal with the backlog, excellent. You may not know the answer to this, but when do you anticipate that backlog might be dealt with? Are we talking months?
I think the panel are, is that right, Sue? They're in place now, or some of them? Carolyn's not here to answer that question, but no, the reason we've
is actually.
got them there.
Carolyn.
Is it?
Carolyn's here. Yep.
Yeah, here she goes.
Here, Jane.
She can tell you about the panel.
I'm actually not going to say when the backlog will be completed because I can't tell you the complexity of the consents, and so I think I could give you a poor steer. But what I can say is that the consultants are on board. We're going to have to do some parallel processing. I've had this conversation with Daniel already this morning. So we'll need to process the consents while we make the improvements. And that is likely to be communication and messages that we'll need to give out to the consents. We've got we've structured the panel so that there's a primary, this might be too much information, but there's a kind of a primary set of consultants and then a kind of a secondary tier, and we can bring the secondary tier of consultants up to the primary group should we need that demand. So it's really just looking at how many we need to meet the demand and actually start to process within nearer to the regulatory timeframes. I would say this is going to take time, but I'm confident that going forward we'll always be moving forward rather than either standing still or going backwards as we've done in the past.
Thank you. I'm just thinking that if I'm involved in my consent going through and I'm waiting, when I read this, I'm going to be asking, well, when's mine going to be dealt with? And then that comes back to the communication. So how are we communicating ahead of time rather than people having to ring up and ask the questions that this is in place and offer some confidence, I guess, to the sector that this is happening.
So could I just respond to that? Michael and I actually met with a consultant last night to talk through some issues that they were having with some of their applications and the perceptions. And one of the tests that ideas that I tested with her was other councils actually put up on their website how many days it takes to achieve certain steps in the process. And I tested, would that be something, Southland District doesn't do that. It would take some effort, but actually that's being transparent and it's also managing expectations. So she was comfortable that even though that the numbers and the days to allocate or the days to process might not be what the statutory measures are, she was comfortable that that was at least a form of communication and she could manage her expectations, her office's expectations, and also the client expectations. So that's, we'll look at what we can do around that.
And again, it's positive to hear the feedback from the sector and linking into that advisory panel where that direct kind of communication happens between those parties will be excellent as well. And look forward to hearing how that recruitment drive goes, because we have a number of vacancies, I think, which are impacting on the delivery, and I don't know whether you want to talk about that further or not, or...
No, I think that's simply a recruitment process. Perhaps you may not, since you've given me the opportunity, I do think that there are some areas that need attention for resourcing. This is my last day at Southland District, so I'll hand some of those decisions over to Daniel and Adrian, but I've written pretty extensive handover notes about what my view is and where I see the deficiencies, but the ultimate decisions will rest with them. But I think that there are areas where if we boosted capacity internally, we'd get better results. And we'd actually better results for the client and the applicant, or the applicant and the consultants, but also better financial results.
Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Could I just add one other thing I think we talked about in terms of communicating with the consultants? I believe that Cameron is penning a letter to go to them fairly soon, explaining where we're at, what we're doing about it, and generally offering to talk to them about it. So that'll go reasonably soon, I would say.
Any other questions, team here? Yeah, Tom.
All the very best for the future. Don't run away just yet. All the very best for the future. This is your last day. Yep. Is that correct? Yes. I think one thing that's going to be constant, regardless of where you go or any of us go, when we're talking about environmental services, this report and what we do in the future is people, right? So if you look at it at a higher level, one of the issues that we've faced is obviously our relationship between local government and central government and how we get these things through. The immigration policy, whether it be trying to realise value through the construction industry. So as an example, it doesn't matter if John Smith's trying to build a house down the road or a major developer's trying to put in a massive development. We struggle to have the pool of people available. We might bring them over from overseas, and then they'll do a major development and they'll be here for 5 years and they'll be trained up and then they'll go back overseas again. So it's really important for us to try and put pressure on central government to be able to hold on to those people. Now, Southland is quite unique because we have a very small population. If you look at our figures over the last 10 years, we haven't had a very good rise in population growth. So that obviously places pressure on attracting consultants, attracting investment into infrastructure and housing and so on and so forth. So unless we have a clear direction in terms of what the market will actually want and demand, we're going to really struggle there. So before you go, can you speak to any kind of solution to that? How do we come up with a solution from our perspective?
That's honestly, that's more than a $64 million question. I'm possibly going to add to your kind of the issues that you're having to deal with. The regulatory sector in New Zealand is short of people as well. We failed to train. For a number of years, we failed to train planners and engineers and all of the people that feed into this process. And so almost every council around New Zealand would be doing what we're doing, having a group of consultants that they have a close relationship with to manage the demand and that they have during the year. So in some respects, one of the things that I could say is we're setting this up, but I think that this is going to be the norm for forever, or until the legislation changes or the way regulation happens changes. But I don't have an answer to your big question. I'm sorry, that's an enormous.
Would you say you're cautiously optimistic that with the change of government and with that desire for fundamental change within the environmental services sector, within the building sector in particular, and with rules around all sorts of things like the Airbnb rules, the lack of worker accommodation, the ease of doing business, which is one of our pillars. For us as an area, and as you've highlighted, based on other parts of New Zealand, whether they be districts or major centres, it is a real concern for us, and the timeline has proved that we haven't really done that well. We haven't, even compared to other councils and so on and so forth. It's be interesting to see what. Are you going on to other councils, or are you, if you don't mind?
I'm kind of resuming the next phase of my life, right, which will be spending some time with my family in Christchurch and doing some travel.
Good on you.
I think you've got a question or point you'd like to make.
I was just going to, it's not an answer to the question, but in my mind, the other prong is collaboration and working with other councils. You have, I can't see how many, you've got Christchurch City Council and Auckland Council now sitting, supporting you at the back. There are ways to do that without being there, and we just have to. And I find that it's generally this is a big organisation I'm sitting in here, but the feelings and the thoughts are just the same. We should be helping each other. There's no need for everybody to invent a policy on this, that, or the next thing. And what you've seen with the ex-city council people like myself, we're there because we've got the community at heart, and you'll find council workers will work collaboratively, and that's the best sort of short-term way forward. We'll be picking Daniel's brains. He'll have other contacts, he'll have things that Auckland Council have done, and nothing is confidential when it comes to stuff like this. So that might get us through a bit, but there's going to be a big time lag before we can upskill enough people for New Zealand, really. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Could I just ask 2 or 3 questions, please? This is an area also that could be potentially subject to new government change, isn't it? Particularly around building consents and the regulatory environment, including the ACT party's plan with National for removal of building consents as long as it's long-term insurance. I'm not quite certain what that means, but so there is clearly a need for us to, in this project, keep a bit of a scan going, and I guess you guys will be much more connected to that than I am. So one of the questions I have, and I'm very, I'm personally appreciative that we are being very upfront with our level of performance. The first thing I think of here is, can I staunch the blood? Okay, so unfortunately for past resource applicants, it is what it is, and we've got the results.
Can you go? I could go to.
Sorry, Jane, can you just mute yourself, please, if you're talking? Can I get some assurance that new applications can be dealt with on time with these arrangements?
It's a big question. It's worthwhile us actually reviewing, could we do that? But I think also some of the work we're doing at the moment is actually understanding the risk level of each application and the size and the complexity, and matching that with the skills and competencies of the staff. And so I think I'll take an action on that to understand how we could fast track the most important ones and the really easy ones. It's actually, yeah.
I think what I'm trying to say here, Sue, is, unfortunately for those applicants who we haven't met the 20-day rule, and we can talk about RFIs and all that sort of drama, we owe them a big apology based on these results here. But I'm making some assumption as a team. You thought significantly, how do I deal with that? But how do I make certain new applicants don't suffer the same? I would have thought there'd be some priority around it. I'll leave it as a rhetorical question.
Take that action. Yes.
I think the other thing that interests me is actually sort of an almost, I'm about to say, theory of change. Is actually the communication has got to be critical around this, isn't it? I mean, I think, Jane, you said Cameron's going to go sector. I think you've talked about an advisory board, because actually it's not going to get better fast. I think that's the last point you made, Jane. It's ironic, isn't it, that actually when we want to do something better, in the process of trying to make it better, the results don't follow directly. So I think we've got a significant issue there, which gets me to the risks, which is paragraph 23 of the report. So we've talked at length about the staffing risk, and you've got some good initiatives, and including Jane's comments, we should be RSD or work with others. And I noticed the Waitaki District Council connection in there. I presume that's to assist with consenting, which is not a bad idea. And I think there are some longer stuff there. I was interested in number 7, which was unrealistic expectations about how quickly can changes be embedded. This goes back to this idea of change and how do we keep the sector aware that we know, we acknowledge we're doing better. These are the changes, but a 20-day rule will not be met easily. It's very simple consent. Can I just check? The one thing that's not on this page is some of the internal stuff that's inside here. So I assume the internal stuff, systems that you've got to get right, are tickety-boo. That's a non-technical term. So I mean, it's things like you've done your stock take into the RT, is you make a decision, that's the thing. You know where they stand. You get those things clear. There's quality and there's internal alignment. There are those sorts of things which are part of the work program. You don't mention on the risk table, so I'm looking for some assurance. You've got those covered, Sue.
Yes. So some of the things that we're doing will cover those more. It's a baseline stuff of understanding exactly what we're doing around how we're performing, so that all of the internal information is actually supporting the outcomes. And so that's a piece of work that's underway at the moment. And the other thing is around the communication with customers. And that Building Solutions is already doing industry newsletters, and those include timeframes and so on. So we're going to incorporate that for all of environmental services. And also doing those field days and regular visits around the district. So those are the things that I think you're right that they aren't clearly articulated in the risk register. And in terms of the systems and things in place within the council, yes, because there are some systems that are going to help this, support this as well, and we haven't articulated that in here yet either. Because there's everybody uses a pathway system, but not everybody uses it well. So there's a lot of work to be done on that as well.
Thank you for that, Sue. That's really helpful. I know that this was a tough report to bring when you first brought it to the committee, and perhaps today hasn't felt any much easier, Sue. But I want to reflect all power to you and the team as you go ahead with this, and welcome Daniel on board as well. I think that's really important. So we will look forward to the next update. You can see that while I think it's fair to say, we can look at this through two things, and you clearly need to be looking at this from the bottom up. How's our system going? But obviously, as a result, you're looking at this from the service received.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what I'm interested. That's why I go back to my question: have you staunched the blood? Because actually, we're worried about the service received in the community, and I know you are too. But we need to join the two from a risk perspective. Okay, that's good. Oh, Christine.
Sorry, just another quick question. So, you mentioned the in-depth report around the survey is yet to come. So then is the next step to incorporate that feedback into this action plan as well? Some of it will already be there, but just to identify if there's any gaps in that plan through the other feedback that's been received through the survey.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Christine. Don.
Thank you, Bruce. Just a general comment. I wouldn't like to be the staff dealing in this space. It's a difficult space. But as far as this council goes, I'm a bit concerned, and it relates to the previous item as well. Already with this one, and bearing in mind that 3 years ago it came to this council and there was already problems then, and so there was more funding provided and that was going to solve it. But it's back, and we're talking about panels of consultants, panels of hearing commissioners. There's been talk of advisory panels, steering groups, research companies. I'm just a little bit concerned that we're tracking in a way that's actually not particularly positive for our communities, and there's going to be a cost attached to this way of doing business that is something that the communities really can't afford to maintain. So I'm just suggesting that we need to look hard at ways of working in this space without having to rely on so many of these external, so much external help. And I wonder if perhaps that community-led approach might be something that we should bring to every decision that comes to this council. Because the way we're tracking is it's ending in tears, basically.
Thanks, Don.
Just a question regarding the overall satisfaction that in those threes. Was that out of 5? Not, I hope, out of 10.
Yes.
Just a suggestion. You mentioned the industry letters going out to people in the building industry. I'm wondering, could they be circulated to councillors as well? Because we sort of get the phone calls, and
Definitely.
it would be good if we were updated on those initiatives.
Good point, Paul. Rob.
Thanks, Bruce. Just thinking about the outcomes of this and improving the priorities. There's a huge, big, long list here of things, and there's going to be a big, long list throughout this sort of process. But I guess just supporting my earlier point around engaging with the sector on making sure that we're prioritising right to get the basics right. Because as we build on certain things and processes around this, it's going to get better and better. But if we get it in the right order, we're going to see more significant gains in that satisfaction side of things. So I think just amplifying what I said earlier about that external engagement with the sector that's using the services of council, whether that's residential or that commercial sector, just getting that right kind of feedback from them in real time, so we're not waiting for another 6 months or 12 months to do another survey to get a steer and then find where that shift is. If we can get that real time measure, I guess. Sorry, not articulated very well, but I hope my point came out.
Thanks, Rob. Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the other thing that strikes me as far as this report's concerned is I'm just very conscious about, you put the 3 options in, and the option 1 talks about that lack of tolerance for pushing dates out. I think it is something that I note we're looking to accept option 3, which I'm not opposed to. I just think it's something, again, that around this table we need to just be very aware of. And I'm just not sure how we track the pushing of dates, because we could end up with lots of reports that are quarterly, but it will only show the push date from the previous quarterly report. So I think that's just something that we need to be mindful of. But I do acknowledge that, out of this confusion, there will ultimately come some clarity. Yes. And some efficiencies out of that. And I think one of the big unknowns here, which I think we should be very aware and transparent about, is that if the recruitment isn't successful, then that is going to impact on timeframes and dates again.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm just not sure how we address that. I don't think it's specifically really articulated as a risk in here, but I think it might be something that we need to include as a risk.
Yes, I'll work on some wording for that for next time. Yeah.
So,
and if I could just add, this all goes back to a really good steering group and tight rules around what you can and can't move, and making sure what you're really saying, Sarah, is it shouldn't be easy to shift dates, but there should be a process if they have to be shifted and a good reason. And it shouldn't be coming right up to council, possibly, if you've got the right steering group in place.
Thank you.
So I was just going to suggest in response to Sarah's good comments, can I just check that you do keep contact with Jane Edwards as our risk advisor so that we can potentially enrich some of the strategic risk we have, which includes staffing. This is clearly an area where we know resources is an issue. So I would hate for us, outside of your reporting cycles, to lose sight of the bigger strategic risks that we've got some areas in our organisation that are, substantially under-resourced. We need to be worried about that. Okay, sorry, Derek.
I don't know, I didn't have a question, sorry.
Okay. Oh, sorry, anybody else? No, okay, can we go to the motion, just check. Sorry, Maggie.
Thank you. Sorry, just following on from what you've said, and one of our risk registers today is relationship and reputation, and it talks about staff burnout. And I wanted to talk about that as well, how it's being managed, because that's one of the biggest concerns around. So I'll bring that back up.
I suspect it will come up under long-term plans as well, Maggie, as well, to be truthful too. Can I just check here, Sue and Jane, did you want us to consider D, or did I hear you say that you are actually recommending, well, not recommending now that we do anything with these dates because you need to have a chance to re-review after this meeting and perhaps a couple of announcements. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we, in
Right.
effect, we take D off the screen because that's not what you're wanting to do at this point.
Because I think we'll need to look at it more broadly.
Can I ask when are you due to report back to us, Sue? I just have a feeling that it would be quite good to get you back in February. I know that might seem a bit unkind, but I think because to know what the dates are. I mean, you've heard dates are important for us.
Yes. Yep.
Thinking it from a receiver's end, perhaps even that we know we're a bit of comfort that the recruitment program is running hot and your panels are going. I wonder whether if I could impose on staff to say a short update, doesn't have to be this full page, but around those key risk areas might be just valuable.
That's fine. I'll just settle on a date.
14th of February.
Sounds good.
That's the date of our next meeting. So look, I'll leave it with you and Cameron and go to talk through whether that's relevant, but you can see that part of the way we can support up from asking tough questions is actually hearing how it's going and trying to provide solutions, which is great. Okay, so we've simply got a motion in front of us that we receive the report, and that in doing so we're meeting the obligations of the Act. Do I have a move and a second, please? Oh, sorry.
How do we go about receiving this information as an attachment? It's not as part of the report.
Well, I probably should, you're quite right, if I'm being technical. So we need to add a D, which is that we receive the tabled item. Thank you. Anything else I've done procedurally wrong?
Through you, Chair. Just wondering if we need to put in there it's quarterly updates, or on the quarterly cycle, do we want something around about coming back to us in the recommendation to say that we do something about the 14th of February?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, sorry, Jane.
you've already resolved to ask for quarterly reports on the 17A.
Okay.
So I think that's on the books, that's how it works. And I think we're looking at as Sue said, connecting up all the information we've got about everything now. So there'll be some way of reporting to you quarterly. And if you want to make sure that we've resolved that again, happy to do that. But it is on the books that certainly the steering team for the 17A were to report quarterly.
Thank you, and Jane, I've just re-looked at my diary and just to give you some modest relief here. So 14th of February, we're already focused on long-term plans, so we can't, I don't want to divert the committee's attention, but we do have a meeting scheduled for the 27th of March. So that is a full quarter from here.
And that's what we're already.
Which is when you'd be reporting back. So I think, Julie, that fits the cycle. They're on the quarterly cycle. I look forward to the March update.
Thank you.
Opportunity if you wanted to come back earlier. I'm offering you, so let's see how we go. Rightio. So the motion is to receive. We've got a replacement D, which is that we also receive the pay for entitled environmental services research executive summary. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Rob. Motion, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Jane. I'm conscious of everybody else. Daniel, best of luck with the new work you're on with.
Thank you.
Jane, thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Bye.
Rightio. We need to keep moving, folk. I sense we're running out of time. But that's been a very important session on, come on up. That's a very important session on two very key matters, which has been clearly big in our minds as individuals and as a committee. We move to the long-term plan update, which will be quickly also followed by item 7.4, where we look at the shy of the fee, the arrangements for the audit actually of the LTP. So there's a level of synchronicity, and I'd just like to welcome also Mike Hawken, our auditor. He's on screen. He's obviously here to talk about the item 7.4, but Mike, feel free if you wish to at any stage as we deal with 7.3 first, and Robin to contribute as well.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Finance and Insurance Committee, the purpose of this report is to update the committee on the progress of the long-term plan project plan timeline. I will take the report as read, and this is an update from a previous meeting that we had earlier in the year. I think it was May, where we presented the timeline. So at that point, we resolved to update closer to the end of the year. In the project plan document itself, the project structure and responsibilities on page 49 of your agenda has been updated to reflect the realignment of staff. So you'll see some things have shifted from the strategy and policy and gone into finance and insurance team. And we've just moved some of those things around to reflect that realignment. The other changes within the project plan is the updated detailed project timeline, which is on page 55 of your agenda, where I have switched that timeline around to a landscape and gone in and put some comments around what's been completed and where we are within that timeline. So as I said, I'll take this report as read. One of the in our report itself, some of the issues that are coming up, and I think we've talked about that a little bit this morning already, is with the change of government, how things might roll. Leading into Christmas, there seems to be a significant workstream plan sort of ahead for our new coalition government, talking of 5 things to get done before Christmas, and as I understand it, there's not many days of government before Christmas, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Next week, some staff will be attending a webinar being provided by Taitoda around those things and those discussions and how they may have an impact. So we'll know some more after that. And at this stage, though, however, until there is really clearly directed change from our government, we continue on with the legislation that we're in right now. So this is where we are, and this is how we will continue on with that LTP. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Robin. There is obviously a connection between this in terms of the timetable and the audit plan, but we'll that later. Are there any questions or comments folk would like to make? You guys are all heavily involved in this. I get that. I did mention how, that this is another, in light of your stuff, Margie, challenge for staff to keep the energy levels and focus and have you up. It's got to be a key risk around the project. How's that going?
We are working, it's getting towards the end of the year. There are some tired staff, and that's natural. I think that would be the same whether it's an LTP year or not. I guess it's the uncertainty that is difficult for people to work in, really, knowing what's going to happen and what might change and how that might affect. As long as we can keep that communication going, and I think then, we'll be fine. But
sorry, when is the Taitoara seminar?
On Tuesday next week.
Tuesday next week. Because it could require, as we say, a bit of flexibility. A lot of that flexibility that is needed is around dealing with 3 audits. And I just want to check, because I probably asked this question before, and I'm sorry if I have. Flexibility might be that we suddenly find that we have got put in 10 years worth of Three Waters data. I presume we have that, do we? So it is it's actually not a mere case, can I stress, Councillor, just slotting it back in, because actually it's a different dynamic compared to a council that assets in 2 years' time, but at least that's helpful. Yeah. Having said that, having done it for 10 years is an assumption, because in its own right, Robin, I just wanted to explore this for a moment. So the Water Services Entity Act's in at the moment, it's legislation, even though there's an agreement between Act and National that a stop work will be put out. I don't know what that actually means. Probably there is a good legal definition, which says we only have the assets in for 2 years, and then we are a different beast year 3 out. So it's probably a reasonable guess, given that idea, that we'll actually have to put the numbers back in. But then the question is, it's not just repeal, it's replacement with something. So the assumption is that actually, what are we angling for? It's not so much a question, what are we angling for in terms of Three Waters management? Are we wanting to keep the assets for the next 10 years? Because the assumption is, if you put the 10 years back in, that's what you're doing. Now, it comes back to the relevance of our assumptions. They're trying to predict the future. We may not be able to do anything more than put the 10 years back in. It doesn't mean to say you'll have it. So I'm very interested, Rob. It's quite time. I'll leave it as a rhetorical question. There's lots of workshops to go. But the critical question is, so what do we do? Is it correct to assume we'll have it for 10 years? I don't think we should be careful. So I don't think we've got it for 10 years. I'm not certain many of the local authorities would want to have their assets for 10 years because of the costs. Anyway, that's probably a bit of a rhetorical. I've got some other questions, but look, the questions you'd like to ask Robin about processes, see if you're heavily involved. Yes, Derek.
This might be a really stupid question, but it's just my practical brain telling me that, given that there's so much uncertainty out there at the moment, can you delay the long-term plan by 1 year? And it just seems a lot of work to do this plan when there's so much uncertainty there. Can it be pushed out a year?
No, short answer to that. We're in a legislative timeframe and have the long-term plan done by the end of next year already. So I understand there is some conversations going on, but again, until we have that direct legislative change, this is what we need to continue doing.
Seems a lot of work for,
The Mayor of sponsored that idea strongly to be put out a year, etc. It wouldn't be impossible, Derek, because actually we do have an existing long-term plan. And it has 10 years worth, and we could use year 4. But having said that, it would still probably require a lot of thinking before you could just pull out year 4 and work with it. That's a political question. Statute books say you've got to have one for 1 July 2024. Another option at the moment. Any other questions for folk? Robin, again, just look at, we were at risk here, and I'm looking here at page 58 of our agenda, and just wanting to reflect a wee bit around it, that a lot of things are underway, and we're back to hello being past our assumed completion dates. So perhaps just move that aside. What do you hope to have had done by Christmas? You've got about 10 days, 10 working days or something to go. Tell me what it is that councillors will have in their hot hands or not.
What we'd hope to have done is, I guess, to go into Christmas break having a reasonably good understanding of where we are in the process, what our potential rate percentage might be, and our consultation.
And through you, Mr. Chair, of course, we've got policies on today.
That's right.
So those form part of that LTP. So we're trying to get those policies locked and loaded. One of the delays that we do have, of course, is the capital program, just making sure that doability, and the auditors are definitely over us on that. So we would like to try to get that locked and loaded and our numbers sorted by Christmas, so that when we're coming back in the new year, you're actually getting the final position of where you're at, subject to any legislative changes that might.
So the financial model, the complete financial model of which the two strategies which are being considered today are built will come in the new year, correct?
Correct.
We're not giving them a Christmas pack.
No.
Right.
It needs to come through this Friday.
Okay, right, okay, that's the 40th of February. Okay.
Or it may be slightly earlier.
Okay, might be slightly earlier. Get some, good, we need to support you and you do that, which is required to do the flexibility. Okay, so critical thing is that we want to have by the end of the year the core pillars of what, and the financial models not everything, but clearly it's where it all crystallises or at some point comes together, particularly when you start talking about what is the rate imposed on the community. So I get that. Then leading to the CD being finalised and then we move on. Okay, that's good. That's fine for me. Thanks. So I understand that now. Are there any other questions for folk? I think otherwise, probably for the sake of the day, and indeed, spend less time in meetings rather than more probably doing. So I want to release you to the day. Can we move to the recommendation, please, which is that we receive the report. I'll move that here. Thank you, Sarah. Discussion. I'll put it all those in favour. Please say aye. Aye. Those against. It's carried. Thanks, Robin. Appreciate that. Well, you might care to stay while we've got Mike on board as well. Oh, actually, you're presenting this. Even better that you stay. Okay, so again, welcome, Mike. Robin, perhaps a couple of comments from you. Mike, we'd be very interested to hear what you are hearing from the sector as well, along with your letter. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance and Assurance Committee. So we, both Mike and I, are here to talk to the draft engagement arrangements letter from Deloitte. I'll take the report as read. However, I'd like to point out an incorrect title on the report. The audit arrangements are with Deloitte and not Audit New Zealand, so this will be changed on the report. The audit arrangement letter is attached to the report, and the key areas of audit emphasis are highlighted at point 11 of that report, which is page 65 of your agenda. Staff have had an initial meeting with Deloitte staff online. We discussed at that meeting the dates associated with the LTP audit process, key contact people on staff, both for Deloitte and STC, completion of the audit self-assessment, which working hard to get done by the end of this week, and the onboarding process for the Deloitte portal, which is an Exchange cloud where I can pop some information in there and information can be requested, makes things a little bit easier in terms of the process. The dates associated with the audit for the long-term plan are also in your report on page 66 of the agenda. And I will hand over to Mike now to speak to the letter. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, and thanks for having me at the meeting. Look, I guess just in terms of the letter, you will have noted that it is in draft, and a key point to note is that we haven't finalised the fee in relation to the long-term plan. That's at the request of the Auditor General. They are applying a consistent approach across fee setting for all councils, and I believe there was intended to be some communication sent out to mayors and chief executives end of last week. I'm not sure if that has been sent, but at this point we've been asked to hold back in entering into fee discussions with councils until that communication has occurred. So that is an open item in the report. We obviously have had some discussions around the timetable. Clearly, as has been sort of discussed earlier, the uncertainty of the Three Waters reforms, I guess, is hanging over the LTP process and planning. We are, as Bruce pointed out, obligated to commit to an LTP timeline under the current legislation, and we'll continue to do so until that legislation is changed or the process is changed. We have heard, I guess, a couple of indications that there is a likelihood that there will be a reform of that Three Water legislation, and that may impact the LTP process. I don't know if I can go into detail as to what those options are, because I think they're being worked through at the moment, but certainly a possible deferral is one of the options that is being worked through. So I think whoever it was that asked the question around the sensibility of a 12-month deferral of the LTP, That's certainly something that is being contemplated in the event that the legislation around the Three Waters reforms is in fact changed. So we're working through that. We can't really, I guess, respond to that until that takes effect. And so we're in this reasonably challenging situation where we're being asked, like everyone, to forge ahead with an LTP and a long-term plan and a consultation document that may ultimately need changing in due course. But, I think we're working with management to try and make sure that we don't get too far ahead of ourselves, but we continue to do the work that we need to in order to not put ourselves at risk of any deadlines if the current deadlines are retained. So look, I'm happy to pause there perhaps and answer any questions that the committee may have.
Hey, thanks for that, Mike, and we appreciate that you've got a hand tied behind your back in terms of trying to finalise things, which is, of course, clearly the reason there's a couple of delegations requested in the motions behind my head here. So that makes sense. So do you have questions for Robin or indeed Mike? No? Just yes, Sarah.
I guess just acknowledging what's just been said about the delegations. I just wanted to confirm that depending on what we end up with as the terms of reference, that would be directly correlate to the fee that we end up paying, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
Sorry, I've nodded my head. I've got no reason to say that I'm making a saying it's a good question.
The backup question is how can that be then written into the letter of engagement?
Sorry, I didn't quite follow the question. Are you talking in terms of the fee?
Yeah, so there's a set terms of reference for completing the audit. The fee generally gets attached to the amount of work that's within the audit, but actually we don't know what that work looks like yet. And how does that therefore get reflected in the letter of engagement, given the amount of uncertainty that we've got?
Well, I think the guidance that we've got is that we have legislation in place at the moment and that we are obligated to undertake the LTP with reference to that legislation. So the fee and the engagement letter will be presented and tabled on the assumption that there are no changes to that legislation. I guess, we can't contemplate in the engagement letter and the fee setting process what the various permutations might be from potential changes. So the only thing we can do is present the letter of engagement and the related fee on the assumption that it will be as per the current legislation. So if that changes, I'm sure the Auditor General will provide guidance in terms of how we then deal with that.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, also Councillor Graney, on page 82 of the letter, it just outlines that should the legislation change occur, then they'll come back to us and discuss any additional things that may need to be added.
I think there's a real challenge here that if there was, and it certainly sounds pragmatic, and I'm not commenting here, by the way, on the politics of the new government, but a deferral actually creates a whole lot more work and cost. I think we need to recognise that it's going to tie Robin up for another year. Well, it won't be another year, but it will feel like another year, I suspect, because actually it is something different we have to do. It's a new project. So in fact, if this gets, it's going to be more costly for the repeal of Three Waters. And again, I'm not commenting on the politics of that, I'm commenting on the impact of that. If in fact there was a deferral for another year, it's going to make it even more challenging and more costly for our staff. Change equals cost. And even if we get a reduction in audit fee on something shorter, whether it's an annual plan or something, they're normally audited, it's a lot of work. So the continual rule change keeps challenging us, and we've already spoken at length today about the challenges for staff. Okay, thank you for that, Sarah. Very good question. Any other questions for Mike or for Robin? Okay, look, I think it's a reasonably clear draft. Mike, I know that, as I said, the situation you're in, and so consequently, if we were to look at the motion, we received the report obviously from Robin. Nobody's necessarily tackled the scope or the terms or the approach, but it makes a lot of sense to me if I can give you some advice around D. We understand where the fees are at. I understood it was coming up this week, Mike, but I understood the addressee of the fee letter. But I think, Rob, when you get it, it might be good to share with the committee if that's possible, please. So there's a couple of delegations, one to me and Rob to negotiate the fee. I don't know how much we can negotiate with you, Mike. And secondly, we are asking Rob ultimately to sign the letter without another meeting, which again is pragmatic, but it's delegating to Rob a chance to clear that one out. So I'm comfortable with those, and I'm prepared to move that as a motion. Do I have a second, please? No. Any discussion on those motions? We know where we're at. We know where Mike's at. We know where Robin's at. This is just a notice to go forward. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that, buddy. And thank you, guys. That's really, really good. Folk, I'm conscious that we have got all of about 40 minutes, 50 minutes. Do we need a break for 45? It can't be more than 5, or we keep going to midday. Take a break? Take a break. I really will.
12:30 for lunch.
So we go to 12:30, do we? I thought it was 12. Okay, we'll just take a break for a couple of minutes. I'm going to get you back at order.
Council will consider reducing or postponing rates. So that's either to remit is called reducing. We would normally be reviewing this policy every 6 years, but there was an Amendment Act that came in that requires us to do that by the 1st of July 2024. And that was particularly in relation to this policy must now support the principles in the preamble to Te Ture Whenua Māori Act. So, and put simply, that supporting is really around helping Māori to retain and use their land. And it affects a number of policies, as the report talks about. So I've just taken the opportunity in this report to talk about what that change does and which policies it affects and what we're planning to do in that suite of policies around that consideration, even though this report is only about rate remission and postponement, because it just sets the scene for that. So the report is making suggested changes to the policy, which is attached in the document from page 96 to 115, and you can see that tracked up. And what we're asking you to do today is actually endorse this draft policy for consultation next year alongside the long-term plan and the other policies that we'll be consulting on. Just a couple of highlights in terms of what changes have been made to the policies. So first up, is really around the objectives that we've got in there, around adding in an aspect of fairness and equity, and that's how we use this policy. So I think when we've talked previously about council's funding decisions, we've got this 5-step process where we think about benefits and exacerbator pays, and at the end we think about how do we want to adjust things in terms of the impact it's having on the community. So this policy is one way of adjusting our funding decisions, basically. So we just added some stuff in the policy to sort of clarify the role that this policy plays in that regard. Other than that, we're proposing a new remission for water leaks. So if you've had a water leak on your property and you've had a high water meter rate as a result of that, we're just adding a specific remission to allow us to adjust that down if you get that, or reduce that rate to what it would normally have been if you get that fixed quickly. And then the second new remission that we're suggesting in here is for non-contiguous rural properties that have a lease on council or Crown land. And so contiguousness is where you might normally, if you own several pieces of property together and you use them together as one use, and they are next to each other or separated by a road or rail, you can get that rated as one property. And so what that means is that you still get the full capital value rates, but the fixed charges, you only get one set of those across all 3 properties. So in the instances with, sometimes there's a rural property that's leasing a piece of dockland, okay? And so they would be getting 2 of the fixed rates. And so we're suggesting in this policy change that we treat them as if it was contiguous if they have a lease for that and they're farming it as one operation or have a forestry operation. over one. And the reality of that is really around the fact that you can't really buy that land. So they're going to be always in this of leasing that property and farm as well. So that is in addition to this policy. And then the only other real change is really around this, setting some context around the policy and where it sits. So that was all I had to really say. We did have a quick look at page 91. So just when I talk about that, the changes for the supporting the principles and the preamble to the Te Ture Whenua Māori Act. This table here is just talking about each of the 4 policies, and you've got another one on the day-to-day development financial contribution, and it's just showing you in the middle column what changes staff are bringing through to each of these policies to consider how we could support Māori to retain and use their land. And then the right-hand column is talking about the other changes that we're making or looking at making. So you can see most of the stuff that we're doing in terms of that change in the Act will be in the remission of Māori freehold land policy. We're not actually going to bring that up. We're going to use the consultation process to gather feedback to feed it into that review as we go through this process. And then with the revenue and financing policy, that'll be adding in a principle, and then we've been discussing changing our rating approach for forestry and indigenous land, which relates to a lot of the Silna land that's out there. And this has got development contributions, which we're looking at having a remission of those. So I'll stop talking, and that's your summary.
Thanks, Cole. That's really good. And I mean, the contextual stuff's up front, but if you need to follow 104, 105, it's got the real engine room of the changes that you're looking at. So I should be careful. Contextual changes are really important, but the actual remission and stuff is on page 104, 105. Do you have questions or comments, please, for Nicole? Oh, sorry, Paul.
Just a question on that point 22 or 23, which is it? 23, sorry. It mentions Western Eastern, Mirihiku, Rakiura, Port Adventure and Toi Toi. The later two are yet to be transferred. What is the transfer? So
that means to the successors, to the people that own that land. They actually have never been allocated to the Māori that were named at the time. It still has to occur, and the Māori Land Court's working through that process to do that action. And I think they've been working on land in Wanaka around that area at the moment to get that completed.
Okay, so that's out of area.
Yeah, so our those blocks are on Stewart Island. Port Adventure and Toi Toi are both on Stewart Island. Yeah, Rakiura. So at some point in time, they will have a list of owners, but they don't have it.
And Ruapuki's covered by this as well. Look at the map.
Ruapuki's a different, slightly. Part of Ruapuki is Māori freehold land and part of it's not. And I've had a question right through this, is it actually Māori customary land, which is actually non-rateable in itself. So for the purpose, we haven't rated it, so we don't rate it. So, and so for the purposes of our rating, we're treating it as Māori customary land. And it's been difficult to get an answer around that. So we're treating it traditionally as we have done. So, yeah.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, comments? Yes, Matt.
Cheers, Nicole. Just trying to get some clarity around the non-contiguous properties adjacent to Crown or council land.
Yeah.
So Crown land's not rateable.
Some parts of it are. So there are some aspects of Crown land that are, and I think it might be where they are being leased.
So if there's an official lease. And that would be on forestry land or something. Yeah,
and we get a copy of that. So I do have one, like a map of a property. I just thought, well, I'll find one. So this is just above Mosbin. And so you can see the farm is the blue bit. And then the dock land, they lease that land below, right? So it's really sort of landlocked by the river. Nobody else is going to use it, and they have a lease with the dock. So in this situation, we will be treating it as contiguous. There's not a lot of them around. This is quite a small, it won't be heaps. We had some discussions internally about if you're doing this for a piece of dock-owned land versus another farmland, about whether actually, if you farm one and I farm one and I lease yours, should contiguousness apply to me as well? But that's a bigger kettle of fish, you know, because you could make that argument in terms of equity. And from a policy point of view, this is where you're unlikely to be able to buy that land. So you can't achieve contiguous status on your own because council or Crown land is unlikely to be able to be bought. So that's the policy thinking, as opposed to making it for anybody who's leasing anybody else's farm and they're next to each other and they're using them as one rating unit. Some councils do allow it, and they have it if you've got a block of land within a certain distance. You might have a dairy farm and a runoff block, and they might be 5k away, and they allow that to be rated as one unit, but we're not proposing that sort of change. That'd be quite a significant change for council.
So in this example here, we've got freehold, rural land, I'd imagine, and then the yellows.
That's the dock. Yeah.
It's leased and grazed, but that dock wouldn't be considered as part of the capital value of the
It does. So the capital. So what we do with that is. We take the total capital value of the whole thing, and they pay rates on the full capital value of both properties, but they only get one set of fixed charges. So like your UAGC, your fixed roading rate portion, they'll only get one of those across the two properties.
If one of the areas of Crown land that isn't rateable is riverbed and lakebed, if I'm right. So in areas like the next parcel down being the actual river itself, an operation on that land's not rateable at all, is that right?
I'm not entirely sure about what Crown land is rateable in the rules and things like that, but I would imagine it's where it's leased technically commercially, not just being used by the farmer, because that is probably non-rateable, you know, being used as non-rateable.
So where would the land use provision come in if you've got, say, a plot of land and it's adjacent to Crown forestry land, and you're going to be contiguous, so there's one rate type? Is it going to be rated as, for roading, for example, forestry, or as a industrial or or rural property? Is it based on the biggest use of the big?
We would have to make that call based on, so it's probably going to be on the primary unit, which will be the main farming unit.
Principal use.
Yeah, it's the
Majority rules.
So if they were, I just can't see how they would have forests. They wouldn't be using the forests on the dock land. The dock land would be more indigenous. It's not logged. You know, like whatever is the main principle.
Another emission anyway, I guess, for landing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Might sort of relate to Matt's question, I'm not too sure, but my understanding is that wharves and jetties council owned are not rateable. Is that correct?
Yep. So facilities that are local authority owned are not. Most of them are not rateable.
So,
yeah.
So could there potentially be would you think there's any sort of appetite based on some of those assets needing to be renewed or replaced, and based on the fact that there is commercial gain associated with those particular assets, is there any sort of room for those being rateable based on the relative user?
So like we do have assets that are leased, that rates are paid on, and the leasee will pay those rates on. When it comes to jetties and things like that,
we wouldn't have a title.
We wouldn't have a title, we wouldn't rate it, but that's where we use fees and charges to charge them. So they, like if you take the boat parks, so if you take the boat parks on Stewart Island, they pay an annual amount. Riverton Harbour pay an annual amount plus a length of the wharf that they use. So it comes, their income comes through that fee mechanism, not through rating.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions I've got? We'll move the recommendation then. I think that seems to be the position. That's helpful clarification. So the basically received the report and we endorse the draft of consultation. So it's got to go to consultation. We're saying this should go out for consultation. So I'll move in a second. Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Rob. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Appreciate it, Nicole. Wonderful. So, into development and financial contributions. Chris, is it?
Yes.
Nice to meet you, Chris.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll let you just go straight into it, buddy.
Yeah, let's
tell us.
dive head first. Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chair and councillors. The purpose of my report for the committee this morning is to consider the draft policy on development and financial contributions. This report seeks feedback from the committee, and it is proposed that the committee recommend to council that it endorse the draft policy to council for public consultation. Council currently has a combined policy that outlines the approach to both development and financial contributions. Development contributions are established under the Local Government Act and are a capital charge on development to recover a fair, equitable and proportionate share of the capital costs that development imposes on network and community infrastructure. That is in order to service growth over the long term. The Act imposes strict criteria for what development contributions can be collected for, requiring capital infrastructure projects which cover increased capacity demand. Council's policy currently allows for development contributions on community, water and wastewater services. However, charging development contributions has been in remission since 2015 in order to not deter growth in the district. Financial contributions, on the other hand, are established under the Resource Management Act and are a capital charge for works undertaken to mitigate the effects of subdivision, land use and development. Financial contributions are currently charged to provide for roading and reserves. The draft policy is proposed to be consistent with the existing policy by keeping financial contributions operative and leaving the collection of development contributions in remission. This recommendation is provided on the basis of the following 3 points. 1, there is low growth forecast for the district over the next 10 years. Secondly, there is insufficient amount of the necessary capital expenditure projects currently identified which can utilise development contributions. And thirdly, in order to continue to encourage, or rather not discourage, development in the district. Only minor changes have been proposed to the draft policy. District growth projections have been updated. Minor changes have also been made to update for legislative change and uncertainty. And staff have also proposed that consideration of a remission of development and financial contributions for development related to Māori land be offered within the policy to meet Council's obligation to support the principles set out in the preamble to the Te Tura Whenua Māori Act. While staff are still finalising LTV budgets, details of specific projects eligible for contributions are yet to be updated in Schedules 1, 2 and 3. Staff acknowledge that regional spatial planning, along with localised development plans such as within the Te Anau Basin, will likely feed into future decisions concerning the application of development contributions in the district. It is the view of staff that the policy should not be adjusted to cater for this until associated projects which spin off from this work begin to be planned. Council has the option to review this policy at any time, but it must be reviewed every 3 years. If approved, it is intended that the draft policy will be consulted on via a process which will be run concurrently with the consultation for a number of other council policies, as Nicole alluded to earlier, and the LTP in early 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Very succinct and well. Folk, so we have a couple of points here to think through. Comments, questions? Yes, Christine.
Do we have any idea of, by continuing with this policy, what the cost has been to our ratepayer in the past by having this in remission?
We didn't work that out. Sorry, it's we haven't had an opportunity to go back and look at the lots that have been created in terms of subdivisions that would be eligible for water and sewage contributions. We haven't had time to do that. You can get an idea.
Understanding what that cost is to the ratepayer if this continues, recognising that there's a forecast low growth, but it'll be interesting.
I mean, the graph that is on page 119 of the report does give you an indication for the period through which contributions were taken for Te Anau, what their income levels were at that time. Now, the growth since then hasn't been the same in Te Anau because there hasn't been a massive amount of subdivision that occurred with Delta and things like that, so it would never have been as high as that, but that does give you a bit of an idea in terms of what was taken back then when we were charging them.
Bruce, thanks for your report.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to make one, sorry, Sparky. One other point is it's really important to stress that the cost of putting the infrastructure in to the subdivision is actually paid for by the developer. So they are putting in their own pipes. It's just the contribution is they're making a contribution to the network demand that they're creating by pumping more water, by putting in bigger pipes or additional pumps or securing more source. So so they do cover their own cost. There's no cost to the district ratepayers of actually putting the pipes in the ground to get it to their subdivision. They have to do that. Sorry.
So that's probably what I was going to talk about, but I was going to talk about the Luxmore subdivision in Te Anau. You know, how many lots are available there? What is the cost going to be? Where does it lie? Does it lie in the district? Sarah's going to talk to them, obviously, I think. Some of it, yeah.
I can't answer that, so.
And how do I find out the costings around that to the ratepayer?
Oh, sorry, Sarah, can you help with that?
Yeah. Just actually trying to now remember how many lots were proposed for the remaining part of the subdivision. I think there's about 23 to 25 in the industrial area, and certainly well over 100 for the Luxmore subdivision. But actually, the debate that has gone on is that pressure that does go on the infrastructure that is outside of these subdivisions, and the spike in the graph in 2022-23 is the Fiordland Estates, and particularly stormwater. So the impact on stormwater, there's been a lot of discussion around that, and I know that staff have spent a lot of time looking actually on that impact for stormwater, and there have been people that are not happy with the just be careful how I word this. Not happy with what's outside of the boundaries of those subdivisions, because they do believe that there have been people that have been negatively impacted outside of that subdivision space, and there is therefore current concern around that not happening or being exacerbated with Luxmore. My understanding at this point is that the stormwater will flow in a different direction to what it does off Fiordland Estates, but they are in pretty close proximity to each other.
So Mr. Chair, we actually haven't had a stormwater contributions one that we haven't actually.
No, that's not true. We did.
Was that way back in 2002 or something?
2000. Yeah, no, we did bring one in for a period of time. One is a financial contribution.
I do have a question for Julie first, Sarah, if I could take Julie's, but if you've got a comment to make, I'll follow up with you.
Thank you, Chair. The policy around all the description of what constitutes a development contribution, that's regulated. So then we are very restricted as to how this is actually used, because of that, my understanding was that it had to be on providing for the growth, the volume of growth it is, and because we're not having much growth, we don't bother collecting it. But then if you had taken to thought that Winton wastewater, for example, well, there's actually been quite a lot of growth in the existing system was established. So we haven't been collecting what would contribute towards that upgrade. So I presume that in that upgrade we are allowing for growth, which then means that future contributions aren't required because we've already allowed for it. So it's sort of a bit of a cat and mouse game, really, that chase around, say we can do this, but then we don't do it within 10 years. Because of the 10 years legislated as well.
Yes, for the development contributions it is. Yeah.
So, yeah, and then they go and change the financial to environmental. So, you know, like, is the policy actually going to be changed to development and environmental contribution? Or what's the policy going to be called? I just sort of think it all gets very confusing when we
Well, it's definitely in a transitional state with the natural and built environment legislation sort of up in the air, which may change. So technically at the moment, legislation's been passed and their environmental contributions, but Chris has worded it in a hodgepodge way, in a merged up, morphed
One
way.
theme here.
In the policy, yeah, because we're not sure what's going to happen with that legislation either.
Yes, because it says it's policy on development and financial contributions, but then in some ways it's crossed out and it's financials replaced with environmental in some parts of it. So I think we probably need to either do it as a slash all the way through, you know, like that's covering both camps, or else it's
through you,
one way or the other.
Yeah. The legislation doesn't require us to make changes until environmental charges or contributions start to be charged under the Natural and Built Environment Tax. So even though the Local Government Act has already been amended to reflect that, we are still able to charge financial contributions under the Resource Management Act while district plans remain in effect. So I guess the title of the policy remaining is Development and Financial Contributions for now is appropriate. At the point were we to transition to that legislation or to regional plans coming into effect, then that policy would be amended to reflect that transition at that time.
So
confusing for everybody trying to.
Well, I think the key, if I've picked you up correctly, Chris, is it's under which plan are we working? It's our current district plan, which is operative under the RMA, so we have financial contributions. Yeah.
Just in terms of clarity, like it's really simple. Development contributions is, I always think about it as demand capacity related. Financial contributions are about negative environmental effects. So they're doing two different things. And a negative environmental effect could be the fact that your development is putting extra capacity on the system and you need to build something to do something with that. Or it could be that you're going to create noise and something needs to happen because of that noise, which isn't a demand-related thing. So there's actually more flexibility around financial contributions than there are around development contributions. Development contributions are highly prescriptive and very much linked back to your CapEx and your LTP and need to be all lined up, is my impression of them. At the moment, our CapEx and our long-term plan for demand-related projects is very little. In saying that, we do have to do a review of our capital expenditure to make sure that it's right, and our guys have put the cost in where the majority lies. There will be a demand component to some aspects of it, so you might be doing a pipe renewal, you might make it slightly bigger, so 10% of that cost might be claimable as a demand-related thing, and we can go back and look at that, but we really want a signal from you around, like, what's your philosophy? And because if we want to charge, then we have to go and do that work. But if we actually, given what Chris is recommending, we're actually okay with the way that we are, then we wouldn't do that work and we would do other things.
Thank you. I think Sarah, you've got a question or point you
Yes. So in paragraph 65. It says the draft policy would be presented in early 2024 in accordance with the Act. So I was just trying to kind of work out whether this is something that we should endorse today. It should be something that we, like, are we expecting further changes that happen imminently? That would mean it would be better to leave it on the table.
Through you, the Chair, we're not anticipating massive changes unless Council's requiring it. So, but this will come back to Council before going out for consultation.
Right.
So, whereas this is obviously a different committee of Council.
Which is that's slightly different to the approach that I took, which was that F&A have the delegated authority for for the rates remission and postponement policy, so we endorsed that. They probably technically have the ability to endorse the development of financial contributions policy too, but Chris wants to go there through the council.
We have been asked to endorse. Look, I think for the consideration of where we're at the moment, because I actually had a technical question I'd like to ask. Actually, I'll ask it one time if you're around the call. Unless it comes up. The question in effect that we've been asked, if we want to pass this resolution, is that we continue the policy of levying financial contributions, which, as you've explained, are for negative effects and are quite flexible. That even though and this comes under 1.3 on page 128 of your agenda, that even though we have a development contribution policy, at this point we are choosing not, in effect, to use it. And the rationale that I've heard for that is that at the moment, it's stark, because I think you're saying there's more work, but if you look at the schedules behind, there is actually an absence of qualifying expenditure. And qualifying expenditure is where we depend on demand, increasing demand. So really it was in the face of a low increasing demand at this stage. I think I'm not mischaracterising it. There's not a point in the argument is why would we risk the disincentive of imposing on a few a development contribution when it might kill the development? Which is your point about actually, it's about discouragement, I think, is the risk. So the recommendation is keep the FCs going, not can the DCs, keep the DC policy in play if you want to activate it, but at this stage, don't activate it. Paul?
Well, I agree entirely with what you're saying. I actually agree with the philosophy of contributions, but the time is, there's no point in collecting them when there's no growth. I agree that we should pass this as it's stated, but just would like to make sure that we're able to be agile enough to change that quickly, because we're in a very changing time with all kinds of unforeseen things could happen. So that's just what I would like to.
So before I take your questions here, can you comment on that, or how do we keep this flexible? You have to go back to consultation every time.
You have to go back to consultation.
Yes, you would. You have to go back to consultation. I think some councils get away with the policy stating in effect, and we'll adjust it we'll qualifying expenditure for inflation. There's a way to increase your DCs on an annual basis without having to go back, I think, but I wouldn't want to be an authority on that. Sarah?
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions, but I guess subsequently, one of the things that I noted was that we're still working on old census data as well, and so we actually don't know what growth we've had or what we're potentially looking forward to. And I would also, I just think it's interesting when we look at things like the GFC and all that period of time. That was where we were collecting in probably one of the worst periods of time, and then we went into a new phase in 2015, which was actually when things started to improve. Not that they are improving right now, but we were charging through that peak period of time where things were setting up for a lot of people.
So I'm just get a follow-up with a question then on Sarah's comments first in the call.
We had to pay some back.
You said more work being done, the spatial plan, the Te Anau development plan, yada, yada, yada. We're not talking about something that's going to be done in time for the LTP, are we? You're talking about something which is going to occur over the next 3 years. That's correct. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, so there is a pragmatic question here. What work would that get done? So, and you're saying it would take some time, because I appreciate spatial plans have to be prepared and what have you. The risk here is that obviously that the sections are created that would be otherwise eligible for DCs going past us.
Except for the fact that we have no costs at the moment.
Yeah, except for the moment, well, we think
and this LTP that we can calculate the DCs on.
But I'm trying to the pragmatics is there's still quite a bit of work to go under the bridge before we would know whether we would add to the cemetery that we've got to develop, whatever it is, 226,000. Correct? That's correct. Okay. Sarah? Yes,
Yeah,
certainly.
so I guess, given what's been said this morning, then, just lost my train of thought. The fact that we actually have an income issue right now, which has been highlighted around the table, people have said we've got an income issue, not a rates issue. Changing this isn't actually going to help us because we haven't got anything to spend the money on.
Yeah, we haven't identified those types of capital expenditure in our plan at the moment. Like I said, if we go back to our staff and try and get them to a portion of, of the capital expenditure, what is renewal and level of service versus demand, and is there a mix of these things? There potentially would be. It's probably not likely to be a lot.
Yeah, and given you've got to refund it anyway as well.
If you don't use it for what you say you're going to afford. Yeah. Rob.
This might be a stupid question, but just running around in my head at the moment. Like, if we leave this as it is there the capacity inside the resource consent process, if there was a big development sort of falling outside just one house or something, for us to require a contribution as part of that resource consent if this policy sits like it does now? Does that trump this, or does this trump that?
The two can't charge for the same thing, the two different types of contributions, but currently under the policy, financial contributions are restricted to the two categories.
I do believe, I'm not entirely sure about the district plan because I'm not up to date, but we have in the past taken lump sum contributions for things related to the development. So I think there was one, I think it was in Manapuri for View Street car park stuff. And so I do think when they're considering that, I don't know the exact rules in which part of the plan it is, but we have. So that's not a development or a financial contribution, it's some other contribution category.
So if you identified an impact from that development,
as long as you're not charging an FC or a DC, then you could potentially charge through this other mechanism, through some sort of other.
I'm conscious of time, Barry, by the way. I'm going to force us to try and make a decision. Another comment, Paul.
So to isolate a place, say Manapuri, where we're doing that sewage upgrade, could we research and find that some of that was caused by growth and deal with that, or is that sort of cart before the horse or something?
I think what I'm hearing Chris and Nicole say, Paul, is that yes, it may be, but that's still to be determined, and we actually haven't
done the work. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
We're not out of time, but we need to do the work properly.
Other complicating factor is the three waters are not in.
That's right.
So
good point. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Sorry.
Okay, so I've got Tom, and then I've got Christine.
So Bruce, so just answering these questions, whether we do or whether we don't, would that be covered under the policy implications 61, that we can review our position on contributions at any time? So in the future, where new projects need to be established, which are associated to demand and DCs are identified as being necessary source of funding, the remission of DCs can be revisited. It basically answers some of the questions that we're asking, right?
So a practical point of view is like if we did a whole lot of work in next year's annual plan, we found that there's all this expenditure, then we would probably consult on taking it out of remission at the same time that we're doing the annual plan and do the policy change. So that would be how I would practically do it at the same time that we're doing the budgeting process that identifies those expenditures.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for that. And
thank you. Just a question of clarification. We heard about with Queenstown Lakes District, just their approach to housing, and where there's been subdivisions, that the sections that have been given to council for that development. I think I've got that right. That's, if we looked at that, it has no relationship with the development contribution.
It's a district plan thing, so yeah, so you can take, so there's what's called a reserve that you give the piece of land, and then there's the reserve contribution and you pay the money. So you generally do one or the other, I believe. You don't do both.
So it doesn't make any difference to what we're discussing here. Thank you.
okay, so folks, the feeling, I mean, the proposition in front of us is that actually don't activate the DC policy at the moment. Actually, a lot of qualifying expenditure that we know of at the moment. Number two behind us is clearly Chris, you and Nicole are working through with all the powers that be about is there demand, and as you said, you've got the pragmatism that this could be an annual plan related adjustment, and that we continue with the FCs. That's what this is saying here. Do I have anybody prepared to put the motion? Thank you, Margie. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Darren. Is there any comment on the debate on the motion? Can I put it then, please? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Appreciate that. Very good report. I think Sarah, I was the one that said you've got an income problem or a rate problem, so I'm very keen that actually we put the EDI on this one. From elsewhere is not a bad thing. Can we go to the financial report? Janie, you've been waiting patiently there. Good to see you back. I don't think you were. Thank you. In your hands.
Good day, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with an overview of the financial results for the first 4 months of the financial year. And in the essence of time, I'll just keep it short and take the report as read. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate that. Any questions, comments, folk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just make one comment to it. You will notice, and a councillor has already questioned me in regards to it, the investments that are shown on the balance sheet, which is on page 175, we have not yet taken out put money into the investment with Milford or Westpac. I'll take that on my head. We've been so busy with other things and just a few forms haven't got completed. They are now getting processed and we will proceed to do that investment and then we'll have another report back up to you in the next period. Just to give you equally context, and it's not a justification, but the Milford Fund, the balance fund in the last quarter was a negative 3.82%. So we haven't been losing anything, but I do appreciate that. I did promise you that I would do it.
Thanks for that. Appreciate that. It also explains one of my questions about the balance sheet, so well done. Okay, folk, do we have any comments or questions people like to make about the performance up until October? So essentially the first quarter, but we do have the very helpful cider on questions. No? Okay. You look at my notes, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And he's hiding the pages up.
Not allowed to look, okay? Rightio. Look, I'm reasonably comfortable, Janie. I mean, my scribbles basically say, we are tracking. I mean, obviously, there's the critical revenue one with the sale of the industrial lot, which is impacting things, brings us into a smaller deficit and a smaller projected deficit. I get that. I've looked at, and the deficit structural, we've planned that. So, it's part of the budget. We know why we've got it there because we're not fully funding depreciation, and we've had a whole 9 yards about that as well. I looked particularly at the issue of our CapEx. It's only a quarter of the way through, but I think generally on page 171, the explanation is that it's essentially timing at this stage. Although I know there's another report on our performance, which I think is a tabled item, we might be stretched on our renewals for roads, which worries me a tad. But I suspect we'll get to that a wee bit more as we look at that paper and indeed monitor that as we go through. Can I ask a question, a really dumb one? It's not a, John, don't take this the wrong way, it's about CIASA. How do they get a surplus with all those investments? What are we doing with it? $1.5 million. How does that, I made a slight pun here. How has this been generated? Is it through generation and we've just got our surplus funds?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. It's been from many years, so we're
and
almost...
What do we anticipate using that for?
Well, goodness.
We're using it at the moment to pay for units of electricity.
Oh, yeah,
we're reducing it.
The interest off it goes into reducing...
Well, the actual reserve is...
Through you, Mr. Chair, the intention really was to have that reserve for the renewal of the asset.
Yes.
But it is at present subsidising the diesel cost.
Okay, so the reserve's going down, but we've still got investments. Yes. That essentially we've backed the reserve with
we still need to replace the system.
Yeah, okay, cool. That's what I thought. How's our liquidity? It's okay, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. Tanya, you'll give me the numbers somewhere for the other track. I just wanted to work that one out. Okay, I'm comfortable. I know where we're at, so I have my questions. Anything else folk would like to raise at this stage? Okay, let's go to the recommendations. Then I've done it again. The talking, I'm going to move that we receive the report by a seconder, please. Thank you, Julie. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, it's carried. Thank you. 7.8, so we're going to scream over to 7.9, which is the health and safety update. Okay, let's keep going and we'll have a look then. Have a look then, going on. So that was cyber, and I don't know whether Julian's coming back, or we could try and find some of those people. Risk minute, Jane's not here either. Hey, how are you? I can go back to health and safety. Great. Brilliant. Good morning. Yes. David. We have met before, haven't we, David? Have we met before?
No, I don't think so.
I'm Bruce Robertson, I'm the independent chair. So lovely to meet you, and thank you for your report, David. I appreciate it. I wonder if there's any commentary you'd like to give us. Happy for you to take it as read, by the way, too.
Thank you. Yes, so just on the phase 3 side of things, for a little bit of insight, is obviously with less than a month under my belt, share a little bit of what's hot and what's to work on. So as you can see by the numbers, some very good engagement occurring by the staff through the quarter as far as reporting. Additionally, a lot of work around the actions and getting a backlog of those resolved and making sure we're relevant and current in that area. And good participation from the health and safety reps and committee with an eagerness from them to be involved and be effective in what they do. Flying on from there into our lag indicators, you can see there's an incident relating to overhead utilities, which ties into our critical risks. We had a very good response in mitigating the consequences at the time of the incident by the contractors involved, but we've got more work going on now in relation to eliminating or isolating that hazard going forward and tying that in with some other critical risk work that we're doing. So we think there's room to certainly lessen that likelihood in the future. You also note on the taking ownership side of things that there's quite a distinct ratio of unsafe conditions versus the safe practices. I can only comment that's reflective of you usually get a bubble when you're encouraging reporting, and so we've got good numbers on that reporting side, and we're picking up what I refer to as a lot of low-level or low-hanging fruit in the work sites, as far as there may be one out of a huge number of signs missing off vehicles or traffic management, and they're being corrected by staff at the time. So I suppose the challenge going forward is that move from quantity to quality for us and get the focus more on critical risks. We've got the 10 critical risks defined, and we're sitting in that early stages. I think there's work for us to move through focusing and then embedding those in what people are actually looking at when we go out there. With the ultimate goal being that we recognise things will go wrong when people are involved, but if something does go wrong, we're going to land softly out of that. And then just as a bit of background, I've put to the LT as far as managing risk, and my work over the next quarter is focusing on updating the operational plan, because that's due to conclude at the end of this year, looking at staff wellbeing calendars with the people and capability team for next year, a critical risk roadmap getting into next year as to how we do focus and embed things, and then also how we disseminate risk levels for review. So for the likes of when we're putting contracts out there, we get a measure of how many critical risks are involved in that contract, and we align our auditing and site visits according to that risk. So we're going to the bigger jobs, all the jobs with the most critical risk in them, and looking at those items at the right time.
Thanks, David. It's really helpful and adds to the A3 diagram. I do have questions for David. Yes, Christine.
Thank you. Just in relation to the managing risk, which you've just talked about, and I realise you've only got less than a month under your belt, and you're talking about your work plan. How might that take care of moving some of those figures along to the positive end? I think it says down there no change this quarter, but in terms of completing the policies and reviews complete, etc., how might we see, or when might we see those changes occurring?
So that ties into having the strategic plan or operational plan developed, and that the main focus in that will be around operational risk. Certainly some of the direction I've had from ELT in the short time I've been here as well is verification for our higher risk activities or contracted work. So that's already involved some engagement in looking at the systems used by IFS growth in our forestry. I've also got 2 other work areas that are of high risk to look at and drill down into, so that we can actually make sure that reality and practice is reflected from their policies and have that, bring that assurance back to you.
Yes, I'm not sure when the report comes back next time. Is it three monthly?
Quarterly.
Yes, so we'd like to see some progress in. Thank you.
I think associated with that, thank you, that was really my question as well, Christine, would be the sharing this with the outline and the roadmap with me, and I'd endorse your view that you focus on the critical risks and the sites where they are evident. Great, by the way, that the staff are keen and demanding. That's good. That suggests we need to do something. Questions from other people? Yes, Margie.
Bruce, thanks for your report. Welcome to the team. Just talking about the health and wellbeing risks. Star, I'm sure someone's talked to me about this before. Star monthly and quarterly reports. What actually is Star and what is it monitoring Star?
So it's very similar to the EAP program, Employer Assistance Program. It's just a different brand, a different company that are used to do that. So they, in terms of some of the work that they do quite a lot on the wellbeing space. It may be, because obviously the wellbeing of people's work-life balance is getting out of check. There's opportunities to go and have conversations and communication. Even it might be a home matter that is causing an impact onto working life. So there are a number of things, but they also do a whole lot of proactive components too, which might include financial planning, for example, for individuals. They can go and get that assistance through that program as well.
So it's a totally external provider, and
an external provider that
potential to staff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Saying that it comes back with quarterly and monthly reporting, so they're just giving numbers.
So there is just a number that comes back to us. How many people have used the service?
Follow up on that one. I actually would like a bit more on that, though. Actually, can I be honest? Because I'm used to getting more out of the EAP services, and it goes back to a wee bit of a sub-theme which you may have seen the course of the morning, but Fran has, which is the loading that we're placing on staff, or that the system places on the staff. And I'm used to being able to get out of your EAP, provide not only your numbers, but an assessment about the dominant reason why they're accessing the services. Again, anonymous. But I'm conscious that we've got 2 big risks. One is workload, that with fewer staff, fewer people are doing more work, and that in itself creates a problem, and indeed just the stress of the situation that they're in at the moment. And I think it's useful that we were able to see the data that says it's either dominantly a family or a home issue, or it's dominantly a work issue.
So, sorry for clarification, the number is confidential, so I was meaning the number is confidential, but we do get information about whether it's, private, being a home life thing versus a work-related reason why they've called up. So
I think that would be useful. I mean, to be honest, I've seen some of those numbers changing in the course of the last half year for a number of my engagements, so it would be useful for us to know that as well.
Okay, we'll start to report that through this channel.
Looking at stress, I totally get the anonymised. Totally get it the anonymised, but it has to be in total confidence. And if you want to put it into PX, I'd accept the argument needs to be in PX.
Okay, thank you.
Although I think most of my members aren't treated as PX, just as long as we have an understanding of the.
Yes. Understand.
Any other questions? Yes, Sarah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just as an extension of that, do staff have a limit on the number of EAP consultations they can have? I've heard of it in some organisations as either 3 or 5 in a year.
A standard process of staff making contact, and that will come through to P&C with a recommendation from the EAP service that we'd like 3 or so approved to start off with, and then they'll renew that request as required. And in their reporting that we receive, it indicates how many are closed off for the month, how many are ongoing, and what likely renewal is needed to complete that time frame with the staff.
So that starts up. So it's 3. However, it's for each is the initial component, and then they can go and get extended if there's a need to have extended. But that's per incident, if that makes sense. So if somebody had a bereavement at the beginning of the year, they need it for family reason, and then all of a sudden there's later in the year it's a work-related issue, that becomes another one, and therefore they can have another 3 sessions, and then if it's. But we also they come in and they do training in-house, so they'll do monthly training. Obviously, those things are not counted in towards any.
No, because they're learning modules.
Correct, absolutely. Proactive learning.
Thanks, Sarah. Maggie?
Sorry, thanks, Bruce. So when you talk about it being confidential, and so the GEMs or you know who the staff members are?
No, absolutely. Absolutely, we don't get any indication of the name. We get an you can talk about that since you.
So the general principle is that the individual will self-refer, and the details are held by the provider, and the provider will allocate a case number for that particular item, and that's all we're aware of invoicing-wise, and a recommendation sessions. So the only time there's likely to be any knowledge within the organisation is that most EAP services also have a background capability for a manager to refer a staff member if they are concerned for their wellbeing, and that would be the only time that you would know the person's identity from an organisational side. But generally, self-referral, and out of my experience with the EAP services, Benestar is one of the better as far as doing the proactive side of things, so that staff actually understand they provide a lot more services than when you're standing on the edge of the cliff. So people tend to engage with them earlier, and therefore generally you have a few sessions and you're moving on.
Another question I had, when you're talking about them coming in monthly for training, how many staff actually go to those trainings on a percentage of staff?
It's maybe something that we could actually report on as well. So there has actually been a significant number of people, but I don't know that I've got the number in front of me. I've popped my head into a couple of the sessions. This table would be full. Typically, so they are very valuable, and I guess it depends on the topic as well. But definitely been worthwhile having the sessions. So.
Yeah, I agree with Bruce actually. That all comes back to us. I'd like to see the topics that the staff are doing as well. It's good for us to see what's happening around wellbeing.
We can put those into the A3 sheets.
Thank you. That's great. And also conscious that, particularly around self-referral and anonymity is really good. I presume we front load this with our people leaders and concerned about staff welfare and engagement that I presume a leader would have inside the organisation. Can we move to the recommendation, please, which is in short that we received David's report. We're being a wee bit short today. Sorry, David. We've got to keep our agenda moving, but I do appreciate this is serious, and I do appreciate you coming. Do I have a mover and a second to receive? Thank you, Margie. Second, please. Thank you, Christine. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thanks, David. Look forward to our ongoing engagement. And as I think somebody said, welcome to the team. Thank you. I think you said that. Thank you. Right, Julian, welcome back. To tie up the cyber security risk, as we said. So, keen to hear any key overarching comments you want, otherwise I'll ask questions.
Well, I guess the biggest thing, we're making good gains in the latest phishing campaign. Included all the councillors in that one. So from our initial one, which was at 11% click rate, we're now down at 3.5, 3. So yeah, it looks like we're getting some good uptake of those awareness campaigns. And also for the SAM for compliance, we did get an award, which was quite nice from the Elgin. So yeah, most improved. So it's also we are now above all our benchmarks and all the categories now. So it's quite good to see. Yeah.
Congratulations. It does suggest that we might have been coming from a low base, but the fact that you moved is actually really good. So, so congratulations to you and the team. It is genuinely a good result. It's great to see that reflected in those SAM results, and we stand with the averages. So that's really good. Do you have questions for Julian at this stage? Very interesting report. Yes, Maggie.
Thanks for your report, Julian. Now, talking the awareness training, which the modules came through to all the councillors, is that going to continue with the same provider? I actually found some of them quite difficult. The way they worded was easy to put the wrong answer in. I thought it was.
And that's why we're not so worried about the correct answer, as long as, because sometimes you gain more by looking at the wrong answers than you do the right ones, and some of them like you could pick 3 of them depending on how we take them. So yeah, I'm focusing less on the correct answer than people actually completing the training and getting the video watched. So
well, it makes me feel better because I thought I had the internet till the 12-year-old.
Not a digital native, eh? Okay, yes, Tom.
Through you, Bruce. Would it be fair to say that a greater percentage of the errors made in terms of human error are through people ultimately being fooled into clicking links that they shouldn't be going to? And does it just go back to, you know, if any of us get an email that we're not sure about, and we go back to sort of, I guess, where the origin is and trying to look for consistencies or inconsistencies depending on the case, and then just quite simply, you know, if I'm not too sure, I'll call you. Just double checking, is that?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the biggest vector now is with emails. The initial click, depending on how they're delivering the payload, doesn't always do it. It's then ask you for credentials, always back away at that point. Some of them, as soon as you click on it, you potentially get infected. Yeah, if in doubt, either delete the email and wait to see if they'll resend it if it was a real one. Yeah. Side of caution is what we.
I was reading an article, Tom, in the Financial Times yesterday, and it goes back to our workshop discussion on AI, which is actually the phishing emails are getting more sophisticated or harder to pick, because folk for whom English is not first language are using AI to generate very darn good looking emails, which, you know, all of a sudden have a greater degree of validity than one of the earlier controls we might have had, which was, oh, this person doesn't really know English too well, or this looks like it's suspicious, so becomes quite careful. Okay, any other questions for? Can I just ask a couple, Julian, just for my benefit? Actually, no, I'm not going to ask that one, to be honest. I'll talk about that later. I noticed on our work program that data governance policy, which is requiring a new IM manager being appointed. Interesting, because it comes back to our workshop as well. And Jane's question about how do we value data. Be good to answer that. Noted where we stand on the SAM. Interesting. I always like the Mimecast email gateway. It still says a third of our emails are invalid. It's a high rejection rate when you think about it. You think about what's coming in, regardless of whether you open or not. A third of them just we're trying to figure out, which becomes really important. Okay, look, that's good. Sorry, that was really useful stuff. We've had that session this morning, and I think perhaps let's just go back to the fact when I look at the the paragraph sort of 3 through 8, I say, great, well done, you're being active. Things are happening, which is really good. And indeed, that Sam nomination that you've moved us up the road is actually really superb. So thank you for that. Can I go to the motion, please? We received a report of a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Sarah. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Jane, thank you. Welcome for your report. 11.5 minutes, because then I have to deal with the two other items to deal with. So, but this probably should dominate our final 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll quickly through it. So the purpose is to present the December quarterly risk management report for your update for consideration. So it's been a busy quarter. There's been a number of events over the quarter with both direct and indirect impacts on the organisation, and those are fed into the report, which I'm going to take as read today. There are a couple of points I would like to just draw your attention to. We've seen big changes coming out of Wellington, not only a change in government, but also the makeup of those decision makers is going to obviously add an extra layer of complexity going forward. So this has implications for our direction of travel and for any long-term planning in that context. So you'll see the report talks to the options available to Council in terms of the long-term plan. Each option carries some degree of risk, and the organisations look to mitigate against those by moving forwards with a document that's both compliant with the current legislation, but that also has enough agility that it can move if it needs to. The second point I want to just bring your attention to is the change in status for the disaster event risk. Council's response to the flooding event in September was positive from the community. However, the event did highlight some gaps in our mitigants that will need to be worked through at both a local and a regional level, just to make sure that we've got the ability to respond to a more severe event when it's required. So while there are competing priorities at the moment, it's going to be important that focus is given to ensuring that we've addressed those gaps before we don't wait for the next event, basically. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And I'll hand back to you, Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I'd like to spend a lot of time on this, and we don't have it, which is a pity, but equally, I'm very grateful for a very informative report. I do have questions for Jane. Yes, Maggie.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks, Jane, for your report. I'm just going to go ahead into, firstly, health, safety and wellbeing, which was just had a discussion around, and so the wellbeing program established is the Benestar program.
That's right, yes.
So that was the reporting I was going to ask you. I was going to report to Council. What are the controls? And going forward too, the pillars that were put in, that were discussed at governance level back in April, is there any update on how they're going to come through into the organisation, the staff? Have you
strategic pillars?
Yeah.
They will be communicated back through LT. I know Cameron has already worked with third-tier managers to talk about those pillars, and they will then be pushed out throughout the organisation. I'm sorry, I don't have any further update.
Could we work out a time frame and a resolution to that effect so that we as governance know when they're going to be implemented through the organisation? And the other one I wanted to talk to about was relationships and reputation and staff burnout.
Yes.
And my concern around how is this being managed, and holidays, time out of the organisation. I understand, a lot of staff are very passionate about jobs and delivering to our ratepayers, but wellbeing comes first at times as well. And when we owned our own business, we ensured that staff took 2 weeks annually together, but all that other little times as well. So I would like to probably see at some stage, if possible, and I don't know whether I'm going into operational, Bruce is going to tell me in a minute, around outstanding leave, around staff, around how many days some staff have, because I'd be really concerned if we're looking at big figures around our staff, because it's a huge liability on our balance sheet as well. And it's been spoken about before, actually. You have brought some stuff up around coming back to this table, and Yeah, Sarah, I'm talking about, sorry, and we haven't seen anything in subsection yet.
Legislatively, under the Holidays Act, staff are required to have 2 weeks minimum.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I know certainly we're coming up to the Christmas break where there is an enforced shutdown for that Christmas period for 2 weeks. I can't speak to the detail of the other work that's in play at the moment, facts and figures. We can certainly come back to you with that. But suffice to say that staff wellbeing is definitely something that is being addressed through the risk report. You'll see that it plays into a number of the risks where staff capacity and competency levels are impacting some of those risks. And it's certainly something that we're well aware of that is being managed.
Thanks, Jane. We have that health and safety and wellbeing concern and that report staff concern. So, actually, believe it or not, this is where annual accounts become really helpful because you start looking at the long-term annual leave provision and why is it growing. It's good. It's good actually financial sense as a secondary point to the primary point of staff wellbeing to monitor his leave being taken. So may well be with us looking at that a wee bit further down the track. Actually, we need, I was in a conversation about this yesterday. Clearly, we have to see what falls out of here, and also equally, I think we have to be realistic that for staff, Christmas actually isn't the time for leave easily. I mean, other than the statutories, because A, we have to continue delivering frontline services. B, we know we've got the pressure of the long-term plan. So the critical question is, do we have, in the course of the year, relevant plans for staff to be able to take leave? So it's certainly something which we could readdress, Margie.
Thanks, Bruce. Just following on from that, when you look at annual leave, when you go back and staff have accumulated annual leave over a number of years, and the additional cost to the organisation as well, and there's also the additional, I don't know whether it happens in here or not, of paying out another cost as well.
Yep. Agreeing with it. That's why I say an accountant always looks at that,
Yeah,
let alone somebody that should be, and we should all be concerned about staff welfare as well. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just circling back to the beginning of the conversation around you mentioning sort of the disaster relief side of things, and on number 68, talking about the September flooding events.
Yes.
And how gaps were evident in the response and so on and so forth, depth of knowledge, which also dovetails into number 70 about a debrief with Emergency Management Southland. There are some workshops occurring. There's one I'm going to on the 12th with Emergency Management Southland, which talks about the survey results from the communities around this very thing. So it'd be really good to know that we as a council will get that information from Emergency Management Southland. Can you give us any dialogue around that? Will we have that information? Do you know?
Fran, are you able to speak to that?
It'll probably come through the committee that we sit on with the Shared Council, so I can feed that back through from there.
Okay. And I suppose also, disasters don't take Christmas off either, do they?
That's right.
So we have to be really wary of the fact that that time of year can be quite high risk time.
Yes.
We've got staff and so on holidays in inverted commas, but when it's on, it's on. So I guess we have to be wary of that from a staff perspective as well.
I can quickly confirm that over the holiday period, there's been key contacts have been put in place, myself and Cameron.
Sorry, I was just getting an update on my agenda, sorry, which I'm a tad behind. Okay, folk, Sarah.
Thank you. Just coming back to that staff aspect, although we do have the close down at Christmas, I think we should just acknowledge that actually Christmas isn't a great time for people sometimes. It does push families together, and actually it's a time of high stress as opposed to relaxation and recovery. And I also know that we did talk about having a people and capability A3 and that hasn't actually happened yet. So, you know, it would capture some of this information that we're talking about. It would also capture, and again, you know, with the risk of touching into operational, it would actually capture things like the number of vacancies that we have across which aspects of the organisation those are sitting. So I know it is something, so I'd like to come back to that and see if there's something that we could actually get.
I'll certainly take that up for you.
Okay, any other questions and points folk would like to raise? Just a couple from me. I'm worried about that IMT, the incident management one, because it's actually about working with others, and yet it's so reliant for a rural district. So it sounds like Tom, you and Rob, you have a level of engagement with these guys. I'm quite concerned about that. I mean, it just, my risk antennae went up as much because there's yet to be a debrief, even at EMS, into the events and roles and responsibilities, and that's September. So, you know, this seems to be a wee bit struggling. So, Fran, it sounds like you have answers for that.
So in terms of the incident, so there's, just for elected members to understand, there's the Emergency Management Centre, and then obviously our council also stands up an IMT internally, just to help coordinate events with our contractors and out on site. So there has been a debrief with the IMT, but also we've done a debrief with all of those Southland District Council staff who went along to the Emergency Management Centre. So we have internally done a look at, from the staff perspective, how the event went, what are our learnings, what are the things that didn't go so well, what is some innovation for the future. That's happened. We have then had the incident management team came together and have been summarising that documentation and passing that through to the ES, or the emergency management team, so that they have our feedback at least around that. The other component is the emergency management team, Simon Mack, will coordinate with and get all that feedback from the community through that survey that was done, and then information from ourselves, from Gore District Council, so on, and integrate that into hopefully one report that gives us all the learnings. So we've done our component of it, I guess, is the step that we're
I get that, and I read that in 69 being IMT being us, we've got that. I'm more worried about, that's a tick, we've done that. I'm worried about the EMS thing, and it's not having a crack at EMS or ES or whoever. I'm just reflecting that floods are going to be our probable biggest risk outside AF8, so it's good to know that we in serious gaps in resourcing, and for us at this stage, it's increased risk. So I'm really just reflecting the key mitigation that we could have isn't happening. And I'm keen to see some pressure there. Pressure's the wrong word. Encouragement there to have that one prepared. Hey, Jane, I also looked at relationships and reputation. I think we've thrashed out actually enough today, and I'm not surprised that at an elected member level there's a sensitivity around perception and the perceived service from us into the community. I think we've had some suggestions there, and I think they're really helpful in terms of thinking about how can we decrease that risk, which is fine. I don't have time to talk about it today, but I was interested in the increased risk around resource and delivery, and your comment around procurement, but I'll hold that off for a different day.
Okay.
Because I would be very keen to understand really the statement, council cannot afford to continue operating in the way that it has traditionally. And I probably agree wholeheartedly with that, but that's a different day. Okay, folk, we the second pun for the day, we are eating into our lunch. Are there any other questions folk would like to raise? Comments? Can we move to the resolution, please, which is that we received the report and that risk is currently assessed. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Julie. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Can we move to the late item, which is the interim performance report? Sorry, Robert. You must be wondering whether your ears. This paper, I read it with interest. Keep your hands.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, members of the Finance and Insurance Committee. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an interim performance report for the period 1 July to 31st of October 2023. This is our first reporting period for the 2023-24 year. I'll take the report as read, but I will just make a couple of points, and thank you for accepting this as a late item. The interim performance report is part of our reporting framework, and the report itself does focus on KPIs, however has percentages of the MET KPIs in there as also. The performance report is a snapshot in time, and it will then go on to inform our reporting at the end of the year for the annual plan. For this reporting period, of our current 58 KPIs, 69% or 40 of them have been achieved, which is a consistent result with previous years. 19% or 11 of them have not been achieved, which is also consistent. And at this point of the year, 7 have not yet been measured, or 12% of KPIs. I've highlighted in the report there is potentially 4 KPIs that could pose some risk in terms of reputational risk for our council. So I wanted to highlight that in the report, but I also would like to acknowledge the work that has been done with our environmental services team, and we've heard about that this morning with comprehensive planning in place to support these KPIs. The 11 KPIs not measured, not achieved within this reporting period, along with their commentary from their activity managers, is in the body of the report here, and in the attachment to the report has the results and the commentary on all of the 58 KPIs. We do have some activity managers here today to answer any questions, so I'll hand back to you, Mr Chairman, for any questions from our committee.
Appreciate a very thorough report and insightful focused questions for Rob and or indeed some of the managers that are received. Yes, Rob.
Thanks, Bruce. Just a question in terms of the water in Riverton. I know last year we did a very good proactive job of addressing that, and it's probably going to repeat itself again this year. I see grants there. Just wondering if we are doing a similar approach to what we did last year.
Yeah, I've got around that. So we started initiating our advertising very shortly, and obviously those tanks that are put in hopefully be finished by next week. But I'm due to go down a meeting now, so I'll get an update on that. But very confident that we'll get out the gate and started early.
So some of the, you would have heard the normal reserve water for the district, but specifically for Riverton, we'll be going into a little bit more detail, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we obviously want people to still conserve. The tanks are going to give us 48 hours extra storage that we had previously. So that's a good interim measure for the holiday period. But bearing in mind that plant does need an upgrade, which is another subject.
Thank you. Any other questions? Partly, I can't let you not go. Just obviously an indicator around these deals being under the year. Can you give us a weird expansion on why you got that sort of position?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So it's really, as most will be aware, our budgets are, particularly from Wakatai, are set on a 3-year budget allocation. And so with the cost increases we've seen over years 1 and 2 in particular, and the budget's not keeping pace, it just meant the work program has then reduced to keep in line with budget. And as a result, the KPI that we set at the last LTP has meant we're not able to achieve that KPI without additional budget. It's purely driven by cost increases. Cost increases not just from a labour cost increase, but also from a bitumen cost increase point of view, which, out of our hands, unfortunately. That's how we manage that.
You're pretty confident from talking to your colleagues. It's not that Southland in some ways susceptible to a particular commercial challenge. It's across the board, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Is there, again, this is something which I suspect we will be waiting with bated breath as the new government announces its budget and what have you. risks around ongoing Waka funding, even in the current year?
Yeah, so with the, I suppose for the
question mark, sorry, not a statement. They had a question mark with any sense.
So with the current year, the budget still is set in essence because of the long-term plan and the National Land Transport Program. So I was really looking forward to, as we work through our long-term plan and the next National Land Transport Plan, as to what those budget levels will look like. And at the moment, it is very much a bit of an unknown because of the change in government as to where those budget limits will sit. So we have, through Council's long-term planning process and preparation for that, looking at increasing those budgets. But there's still that question mark around, I suppose, the Waka funding component of it, which is very much determined through what the government sets through its government policy statement around land transport, which is a big unknown at the moment.
But the council with the last long-term plan didn't. With the last long-term plan, that Waka suddenly changed the allocation.
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's going to reflect the fact that not only for managing this year's performance, but actually for the LTP, it's an assumption that remains open right until that was the 30th of June, more or less. I seem to recall, if I'm showing my age, but I think it was the 30th of June. We need to be very wary of that. So this is sort of a risk around performance generally, let alone the fact that we've got a challenge here. Okay, look, that's really helpful. Folk, any other questions that we'd like to raise about performance? Thank you, very good, and I'm glad that you look towards the year-end result as well, Robin. That's really helpful. And I'm conscious you spent a lot of time on this on the LTP, so well done on being able to manage this at the same time. Can we move to the recommendation, please, which is that we receive the report.
It's not a question.
It's receiving the report by the mover. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Julie. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
They do.
Against? Carried. Motion to move the public for one item. I think it's a good reason. Can I put that motion? Sorry, can I have a second, please? I'm a bit quick, aren't I?